The leader of the thieves was furious. A brat had taken down his entire crew. Just then, someone kicked the door open. It was the same brat from before. He walked in confidently, dragging one of them by the hair. As the thief tried to escape, the boy gave him a menacing look and said he would show no mercy. Because this guy had been causing trouble. He had beaten up an old man in the middle of the village, but our brat showed up and intimidated him. Then he smashed his face with a single punch. Inside the hideout, the boss threatened to go after the brat's sister. But why did he have to say that? The henchman laughed, while the boy quietly closed the door, because they were about to settle this with words. He said his name was Eldomia Aga, and that they were about to witness true terror. The moment the bandits charged at him, he moved like lightning and destroyed the leader with one devastating punch, because he's the one who runs this whole place. Inside, an elf comments that he ended up fighting those men anyway. She then continues, asking if he hadn't said they weren't even worth the time. Calling him by his nickname, she faces him, revealing that her name is Acelia Enderinia. Going back in time, he tried to flee the conversation, telling her not to worry. Back to the present, he sighs, explaining he couldn't stay quiet hearing them offend her. Serving the food, she says it's hard to argue when he talks like an adult. During dinner, she asks why he took so long, since the fight was quick. In another flashback, he interrogated the boys, asking if they were just runaways. Squeezing one's face, he gets irritated learning they were just troublemaker kids. Watching the boys leave, he just observes as they thank him and run away. Turning to the other group, he asks if they also don't intend to go back home. Then the girl answers that, unfortunately, they have nowhere they could go now. Hearing this, he realizes that those children in front of him are truly orphans. Taking a deep breath without much choice, he decides he'll help them somehow. Back at dinner, he explains he took long because he was looking for a place for them to stay. While eating, he says he has his sister, so he can help the others. Continuing the conversation, he says he just wanted to give those children a chance. With an awkward smile, he scratches his head, finding all of this kind of embarrassing. At this, his sister jumps on him and hugs him, saying he's her little brother. Lying on the floor, she comments that 3 years have passed since they met. Looking at the ceiling, she says she never imagined having such a peaceful life. Thoughtful, he wonders what would have happened if the two had never met. Closing his eyes for a moment, he begins to remember that specific day. Going back in time, a destroyed village marks the beginning of that fateful memory from the past. Crying and trembling, the young hero could barely hold that enormous sword in his hands. In front of him, the elf was all chained up, waiting for her terrible fate. Without strength, he can't bear the weight and the sword ends up falling to the ground. Right after, his body also gives in, and he falls to his knees, completely exhausted. Seeing the boy on the ground, the elf just stares at him, without saying a word. Around them, several defeated bodies showed the result of that brutal and bloody battle. Running desperately, someone tried to escape amid the chaos of that ruined place. The elf ran terrified while the men shouted orders to search everything. Right after, the group of bandits attacked villagers, looking for any trace of her. Out of patience, one of them breaks down a house door with a strong blow. Furious, the boss yells about the elf's value, threatening all his henchmen. Changing scenes, a young man was leaning back, completely devastated by the situation. He then opens a locket, revealing the photo of a woman important to him. Next, he grips the object tightly, remembering his great personal loss. Back to the bandits, they were tying people up while complaining about not finding the elf. But the boss gets irritated, saying she didn't get far with the necklace. Hidden, the elf panics, realizing they were very close by. Trying to move, she ends up being thrown inside one of the hideouts. Then another woman runs into the same place, trying to protect herself from danger. Already inside, the elf breathes relieved, wondering what she would do now. Suddenly, she hears a noise and looks back completely startled by something. Turning around, she finds a frightened little boy in the same hideout as hers. Seeing the elf, the boy becomes completely paralyzed, not knowing what to do. Outside, the boss gets tired of searching and decides to use a different power. With the power activated, the elf's necklace glows and she feels intense pain. Screaming very loud, she feels the energy coursing through her entire body without stopping. Hearing the scream, one of the henchmen warns that he finally found her inside that house. Fallen on the ground, the elf stares at the men with rage, even without strength to fight. Capturing the girl, the boss orders everyone to take the valuable items from the village. As she was being taken away, she looked back, wondering if the boy was okay. Remembering before, she hid him quickly in a closet so nobody could find him there. Then the boss hears a noise coming from the house, looking suspiciously at the place. Suddenly, the boy appears at the door, kneeling with a sword in hand. Terrified by the situation, he can barely breathe, trembling with pure fear of the bandits. Seeing him there, the elf asks desperately why he left the safe hideout. Then another man appears, telling the boss to capture the boy to sell him too. Approaching the boy, the man tells him to come quietly if he wants to keep living. Crying scared, The boy responds that his parents are still around somewhere. Hearing that, the other henchmen start to laugh, saying the boy is an idiot. With a cruel look, the man says he'll tell him the truth of the situation. Revealing the scene, he shows that everyone was defeated by the Demon King's army. Then he states that everyone there is dead, except for the little boy. Saying they're his masters now, he's hit by a strong and sudden blow. With the sword in hand, the boy advances and hits the man square in the chest. At the same instant, the bandit looks down shocked at the wound he received. Seeing the scene, the other henchmen panic and prepare their weapons to fight. With a determined look, the boy faces them all, leaving the men completely without reaction. Right after, the sword plants itself forcefully in the ground, right in front of the boy. Trembling a lot, he tries to hold the weapon, which seems to move completely on its own. Scared, they wonder how he got that power, suspecting the sword is magical. Then they comment that a magic sword could be worth a fortune in the right markets. Then a sword appears at one of their necks, making the man terrified. So the boss orders them to get the sword, threatening anyone who tries to flee from that fight. Hearing the order, the henchmen prepare to attack, even though they're very afraid. Advancing all together, they run toward the boy, going at him with everything. Seeing the imminent danger, the elf screams desperately, asking the boy to run away. One of them then runs ahead, yelling that he'll take the magic sword for himself, but suddenly, his body stops in the air before even completing the blow. With a quick movement, the boy hits the man, throwing him far with the impact. Being launched away, he propels himself forward, preparing another blow with the sword. With his eyes shining, he holds the sword firmly, ready for the next attack. Understanding nothing, the boss wonders who the hell that mysterious boy is. Right after, he hits another enemy, making the boss doubt about the magic sword. Realizing the truth, the elf tells herself that this isn't a magic sword. Standing among the fallen enemies, he hears someone yell for him not to move. Then the boss appears holding the elf, threatening the boy with her life. Trying to warn it's a lie, the elf is silenced by the boss with his hand. Thinking to himself, he says he would never hurt such valuable merchandise as her. With a cruel smile, he plans to get the sword and then finish off the boy. Getting no response, he yells at the boy, warning that his savior will die. Then he extends his arm and throws the sword, complying with the bandit's request. Right after, the sword flies through the air, passing far from the boss and the hostage. Being caught by surprise, he ends up releasing the elf unintentionally in the whole process. Ignoring the girl, he runs desperately toward the sword that fell on the ground. Then he throws himself, stretching his arm to grab the treasure all for himself. But the boy appears behind, warning that a magic sword never existed in that place. The next instant, he sits exhausted, surrounded by the bodies of all his enemies. Letting out all the air, he finally breathes relieved after the great danger passed. Next, he freaks out alone, screaming for almost dying after everything he went through. Watching from afar, the elf understands that the sword was never magic from the start. Revealing the truth, he deceived them using only his physical strength the whole time. Using the boss's greed, he created the perfect distraction to finally counterattack. Taking the sword from a body, he managed to defeat the last enemy with his strategy. Seeing the exhausted boy, she wonders, intrigued, who he really is after that. Approaching him carefully, she asks why he decided to save her from the bandits. Without looking at her, he just responds that he didn't intend to save her. Then he explains that this was his home, and he couldn't let the bandits continue. Hearing the explanation, she asks, surprised, if he's also a mage by any chance. Turning to the side, he tells her he heard the bandits talking about her earlier. Then she lowers her head, confirming to him that the suspicion was totally right. With a slight smile, he comments that maybe the gods really do exist out there. Right after, he shows an orb, asking if she'd like to make a deal. Seeing that object, she's shocked, unable to believe what was in front of her. Offering her freedom, he proposes that she stay with him for just 8 years. Completing the proposal, he asks her to stay until he becomes an adult. Explaining the reason, he reveals he has no parents or anyone to help him. Saying he can't live there anymore, he shouts that he just wants to survive. With all his determination, he swears he'll survive, no matter what happens. Returning to the present, someone suddenly calls his name, startling him. Then a friend appears and grabs him, asking what he was thinking so much about. Right after, he comments that he heard about the fight with the orphans and the scolding. Explaining the situation, he says the group grew and became a problem for the village. With a smile, the friend says it was great to see him take them all down quickly. Awkwardly, he receives an apple, not really understanding the reason for the gift. Then the friend offers the fruit, saying it's a thank you gift for everything. In the back, the shop owner argues with the friend, saying the old man would pay. Arguing with the owner, the friend tells him not to be stingy with the hero. In the middle of the conversation, another voice yells his name, calling his attention. Turning to look, he sees one of the boys from before who ran there. Behind the boy, the other orphans also appear, looking quite scared of something. Asking what happened, he hears the boy try to explain the whole situation, desperate. Screaming desperately, she warns that suspicious men appeared to kidnap them all. Hearing the news, he's completely shocked, not knowing what to say. Then the memory of his old village catching fire comes back full force in his mind. Remembering that day, he recalls he never managed to forget that great tragedy. At that moment, he lost everything without being able to do anything, feeling the pain of weakness. But since he arrived there, that village became his second home, and most important of all, Asili became someone very precious to him. Clenching his fist tightly, he swears to himself that he won't allow it. With a determined look, he asks where those men can be found right now. Cornering a girl, the men tell her to shut up and come with them. Shouting at the men, she asks who they are and why they're doing this. With a smile, one of them says she just needs to obey and follow them quietly. Then, a hooded man comments that she doesn't seem to have the dignity he expected. Hearing the description, she realizes they're not just ordinary kidnappers like she thought. Then the hooded man tells the others to take her, saying he'll pay after confirmation. Being grabbed by one of them, the girl screams for them to let her go, trying to break free. But suddenly, the hero arrives and strikes all the kidnappers with a precise blow. Taking one of the hits, the hooded man looks to the side, completely confused. Happy to see him, the rescued girl shouts his name, relieved by his help. Knocking down another, he returns the question, saying that's his line to the man. With a serious look, he faces the last enemy, wanting to know what they're doing there. Unaware of his existence, the hooded man wonders what a boy is doing there. Standing with the girl, he says the men are bold to come kidnapping in his home. Then, the last thug advances, shouting at the boy about what he thinks he's doing. Crouched down, he says that since the man doesn't know him, he's not from the village. With a sigh, the hooded man regrets having trusted those thugs to do the job. Then the hero warns that messing with the girl is the same as picking a fight. With his sword in hand, he says the man will have to take him down first. Irritated by the audacity, the man grabs his weapon, telling him not to be cocky. Advancing with the blade, he tries to hit the boy with a quick and precise strike. But to his surprise, the hero manages to dodge, making the man shocked. Right after, the boy throws a handful of sand, taking advantage of the short distance between them. Being hit in the face, the man brings his hand to his eyes, feeling the burning. Coughing, he wonders when the boy managed to throw sand in his eyes. Blinded by the sand, he complains that he can't see anything in the middle of that fight. Taking the chance, the hero advances and lands a direct blow to his face. With the impact, the man is thrown back, falling to the ground violently. Facing the enemy, he says the man isn't as impressive as he thought. Lying on the ground, the hooded man just curses at him, showing all his anger and frustration. With a furious look, the hooded man swears he's going to kill the boy for this. Suddenly, he notices the villagers arriving, seeing that the commotion attracted many people. Noticing the witnesses, he realizes he won't be able to do anything more with so many people watching. Determined, he grabs something from inside his clothes to be able to escape from there. Right after, a large smoke covers the village, making everyone startled by it. Worried, the hero wonders if the girl is okay after all that confusion. Seeing that the enemy fled, he regrets not having managed to prevent his escape. Facing the thugs, he comments that it seems they were completely abandoned by the boss. With a threatening look, he approaches the man and asks for more information about him. Desperate, the thug begs for forgiveness, saying he was just following his boss's orders. Upon hearing about nobility, the hero is confused, not understanding the story properly. Then the man explains that the girl is a noble survivor of the war, worth a lot. With no interest in the rumors, he asks again about the identity of the man who fled. Afraid, the thug swears he doesn't know anything, saying it's the truth. Finally, he ties up the two men, saying he'll leave the rest to the guards. Approaching her, he asks if she's hurt after all the fright. Scared, she comments on how dangerous people were walking around there freely. Then he takes her away, telling her to rest and that the village is dangerous. On the way, she suddenly stops, seeming shocked by something in front of her. Confused by the reaction, he asks what's happening there at that exact moment. Inside, several children were working together, making the inn very busy and different. Surrounded by the children, he hears them ask if the girl is okay from the kidnapping. Next, a boy asks for help, saying they're short on staff at the place. Hearing the problem, he gives the idea of assigning the others to the work. Suddenly, the inn owner appears, happy to see him after so long. Coming close, she comments that she heard he punished some bad guys again. Not giving it importance, he says she's the impressive one for taking care of the children, but she denies it, saying she didn't do anything to help organize everything. Surprised by the answer, he asks who was responsible for all the tasks. Revealing the truth, she points to the girl, saying she took the lead. Impressed, he comments that she's a brilliant girl who learns everything very quickly. Thinking about the book in the menu, he asks if she knows how to read and write. With a smile, the owner says she forgot, but she writes very well too. Alone, she wrote everything in her room, showing better grammar than hers. With this new information, he remembers the rumor about the missing noblewoman in the war. Approaching her suddenly, he stares at her with a serious and inquisitive look. Being grabbed by him, She asks frightened what he wants with that approach. Then he asks if she knows the hooded man who tried to kidnap her before. Stuttering, she denies knowing, asking him to let go of her hand right then. Without listening, he pulls her, telling her to go with him for a second. Being dragged, she looks at him, feeling her heart beat faster with this. Screaming, she tries to break free, but he continues taking her somewhere. Closing the door behind them, he takes her to a more private room. Alone, she wonders why her heart is beating so fast suddenly. Remembering the sensation, she realizes she felt the same when he fought before. Thinking about what she felt, she thinks that for a moment he seemed pretty cool, but he calls her name, pulling her from her confused thoughts suddenly. All awkward, she asks for time to think, saying she's not ready for this. Not understanding the reaction, he says he only has one thing to ask her. Then he presses her, wanting to know if she's the missing noble lady from the rumors. Explaining his theory, he says that's the only explanation for her kidnapping. He continues, mentioning they talked about the daughter of a fallen noble house. With a smile, she asks if he believes the word of those men and what proof he has. Hearing the mockery, he says he had his doubts too, but the evidence is clear. Her actions, like expanding the inn and helping the children, were very suspicious. On top of everything, she handled the paperwork, something a common orphan wouldn't know how to do. Concluding, he says that would be impossible without a high-level education since childhood. Trying to cover up, she says it was all just a big, strange coincidence. Not believing her, he says he needs to hear the truth to prevent it from happening again. Scared by the possibility, she clenches her fists, thinking about what she should do now. With a sigh, she says she can't talk about it, at least not yet. Worried, she asks what he plans to do with the kidnappers who escaped earlier. Remembering the conversation, he says he's going to their base to finish them all off. Shocked by the plan, she asks if he's thinking of going there alone. Trying to stop him, she says they're on a completely different level from the others. Then she reveals the man is part of an underworld assassin group. Unfazed, he says he can't ignore a kidnapping attempt in the village. With firmness, he promises he won't let anyone lay a finger on his people. Feeling guilty, she apologizes, saying it's all her fault in the end. He then comforts her, saying the fault lies with the bandits, not her after all. Stroking her gently, he asks her not to worry about any of this anymore. With a touch to his chest, he guarantees he'll take care of everything else alone. Confident, he says he's much stronger than she could even imagine. Changing scenery, it's already night, and someone comments about one of the men returning. There at the camp, the men were arguing about the boy interfering with their mission earlier. One of them tries to calm the situation, saying the mission was technically a success. But the hooded man swears he'll kill the boy for humiliating him like that. Another man reminds him they have orders to wait and not ruin the plan. Irritated, he threatens the man, saying he'd attack him if they weren't from the same faction. Suddenly, a third man appears, making the other two stop the fight immediately. Hearing a noise, he orders one of the men to check what's happening there. Coming out of the bushes, the man asks his partner what he found over there. Seeing nothing, he responds there's no one. Probably just an animal, but suddenly the hero appears and lands a fatal blow on one of them. In the blink of an eye, the man's head flies off, surprising everyone. Seeing the scene, the other thug screams terrified, not understanding what just happened. Behind him, the hero is already preparing for his next quick move. With rage, the hooded man curses at the boy, impressed that he actually showed up there. Shouting at his men, he orders them all to kill the boy right that instant. One of them advances, but the hero dodges and counterattacks with a strike from his sword. Hitting the man's neck, he defeats him with a single, precise blow. Right after, he spins and strikes the other two thugs coming in his direction. With a fierce look, he faces the remaining enemies, ready for the next charge. Moving in a zigzag, he dodges all the strikes with great agility and precision. Seeing the scene, one of the men prepares, waiting for the right time to attack. Standing in front of the last ones, he prepares to finish them all at once. With a single movement, he defeats the last two men all at once. Shocked, the hooded man wonders who the boy is that defeated his men. Recognizing the enemy, the hero says it looks like he found the right place. Threatening the boy, the man says he won't let him get away this time. Then the two advance, and their blades clash with impressive force. Feeling the power of the strike, the hooded man wonders about that strange sensation. With the sword in his hand, he realizes the boy is using magical power. In this world, people use magical power to activate their special and unique abilities. Knights, for example, refine this power into aura to strengthen their own bodies. Not understanding, the man can't believe a boy could have so much power. But unlike everyone else, the hero raises his sword, showing all his strength. With a unique power, he can use magical power without needing to refine it first. With a precise strike, he hits the man, throwing him far away with everything. Staring at the fallen enemy, he praises him for having the courage to fight. Without giving it importance, he turns around, saying none of that matters anymore. With one of the thugs left, he says he left him alive to get answers. Threatening the man, he grabs him forcefully, making the thug scream in fear. Then he demands to know who the mastermind behind that entire attack is. Without patience, he says he needs to get back home or his sister will scold him. But suddenly, an enormous dragon appears, interrupting the interrogation of the two there. Surprised by the appearance, the hero strikes the dragon with a blow from his sword. With a powerful punch, he throws the monster's head far away with ease. Fallen on the ground, the thug wonders if that creature really was a wyvern. Still shocked, the hero comments it's the first time he's seen one in person. Known for being the fastest transport, they also have a very high cost. Realizing the truth, he understands that whoever can pay for one isn't a bandit. Suddenly he stops and looks to the side, feeling something is wrong. At the camp, he notices there's another carriage parked a bit farther away. Hitting the man, he throws him far, preparing for another important question. Threatening the thug, he asks where the other wyvern is, or he'll die. In fear, the man reveals a knight named Delta took the other wyvern. Realizing the trap, the enemy understands he predicted his arrival and deceived him. With rage, he realizes he was used to get away from the girl and waste time. Meanwhile, the girl was unconscious, being carried away from her protector. On top of a roof, a man was carrying her toward a large dragon. Looking back, the man just smiles, showing his plan worked. Revi wakes up confused and tied up, not recognizing her surroundings. Looking up, she realizes with total despair that she's in the sky. The scene reveals Delta mounted on a wyvern flying with her. Shocked by the creature, she hears that she'll be taken to a new place. Furious, Revi glares at the knight who kidnapped her from behind. Delta simply responds that he'll use all necessary means to do so. Then, he threatens her to stay quiet during the journey. Flying very high, they continue their long trip over the dense forest. Even so, Revi believes the village people will come rescue her. Hearing this, Delta reveals that no one who knows her will remain alive. Not understanding anything, the girl is shocked by the terrible revelation. Changing scenes, we see the inn in flames with everyone down. Even desperate, she screams that Eldomia will definitely save her. Cutting to the forest, the leader of the assassins talks with his men. Right after, Eldomia appears fallen and severely wounded on the forest floor. Remembering Eldomia, Revi regrets not listening to him. Feeling guilty, she laments having involved the boy in her problems, but Delta states that she'll forget the commoners when she returns to the capital. Suddenly, he notices a presence and looks up completely shocked. Flying toward them, Eldomia simply emerges from the sky with his sword. Totally surprised, Delta has no time to react to his sudden approach. Meanwhile, the boy prepares a powerful strike with his blade in hand. In a single attack, he hits the wyvern's head squarely with force. Not understanding anything, Delta wonders how he managed to get so high. His eyes widen as the wyvern was taken down with one blow. Right after the impact, Eldomia lands on the body of the giant creature. The two then face each other, crossing their swords there. With difficulty, Eldomia withstands the experienced knight's counterattack and retreats. They continue the fight, balancing on the monster falling from the skies. At that moment, Delta finally realizes that this was the boy called Eldamaya. Continuing the fight, they exchange blows while the wounded wyvern keeps falling. Then Delta repels the boy, finding it impossible he could have jumped from so high. Looking at the sky, he spots another flying creature and concludes he has an accomplice. In the distant sky, a figure appears with another wyvern to support the attack. With his eyes glowing, Delta releases his energy and stares at the boy fixedly. Next, he unleashes a sequence of rapid strikes against his opponent. Defending himself as he can, Eldomia withstands the pressure of the attacks, but gets slightly wounded. Surrounded by his energy, Delta prepares his sword to end everything there. Advancing to finish, he approaches the boy to land the decisive blow. In the last second, one of the attacks ends up hitting Eldomia's face, but suddenly a very strong light illuminates the boy completely. Unable to see, Delta shields his eyes from that unexpected and intense brightness. Looking at the light, he realizes it was the sun rising on the horizon. Taking advantage of the opening, the boy lands a direct hit on Delta's chest. Right after, Eldomia grabs Revi and warns her to hold on tight to him. Gripping Revi firmly, Eldomia jumps from the wyvern in free fall with her. Then, the two land safely on the second wyvern that was approaching them. Seeing the plan's success, the pilot celebrates the rescue very relieved. Thanking him, Revi worries and asks if Eldomia is okay, but a serious wound on his chest starts bleeding heavily there. Remembering the fight, he realizes that Delta managed to counterattack in the last second. Seeing him collapse, Revi despairs and tries to keep him awake in her arms. Flying toward the sun, Eldomia finally faints while the girl screams. Sometime later, the boy suddenly wakes up in a bed, somewhat disoriented. Looking around, he recognizes his home and sees Celia nearby. Observing the girl, he realizes she had been by his side taking care of him. Then, he notices she was sleeping, holding his hand the whole time. At that same instant, the slight movement makes her wake up and open her eyes. Seeing that Eldi woke up, she holds him tight, very happy and relieved. Right after, she scolds him for worrying her, and he apologizes. Hugging him tightly, Asili says she's very happy he's safe. He then returns the hug and apologizes for making her worried. After, Asili mentions that Revi visited him every day, very concerned. At that moment, the red-haired girl appears at the door and finds him awake. Running to him, Revi hugs him suddenly, leaving the boy surprised. But then, she starts hitting him several times for worrying her. Seeing the scene, Asilia just laughs at the funny interaction between the two youngsters. Right after, Eldomia notices her clothes and jokes about her noble family. Enjoying the compliment, she confirms his suspicion with a confident smile. But he says that now she can go back, and the girl interrupts him seriously. At that, she grabs his hand firmly, looking into his eyes. Then, Revi invites him to go with her to the royal capital. Refusing the invitation on the spot, Eldomia leaves the girl unable to believe his answer. Then, he explains that he has a greater goal and needs to become much stronger. Revi still offers the royal knights, but he says that Asilia is his only master. After all, he knows very well how powerful an elf mage can be. Hearing the refusal, Revi suggests that there's someone even stronger than her. At that exact moment, an armored figure appears at the door of the house. Mocking the idea, Eldomia doubts that a big shot would waste time with him, but a blonde man appears imposingly right behind him, without making a sound. With wide eyes, the boy is startled by not having sensed his presence. Turning around, he's shocked to see the man who appeared magically. Not knowing who he is, Revi places her hand on his shoulder to calm him down. Soon after, she greets the newcomer, calling him Sir Ecaf calmly. In response, the knight formally addresses her as Lady Lagnus with great respect. He then reveals her full name, Marchioness Lagnus Lienda Revian, the Shield of the Kingdom. Absolutely shocked, Eldomia discovers the true noble identity of the girl he knew. Remembering the map, Eldomia is shocked by the size of Revian's territory. He understands that she wasn't just a noble, but from the powerful Marquess family. Noticing her importance, he observes the conversation with the knight from afar. At that moment, the knight's eyes fix directly in the direction of the startled boy. Approaching him, the man asks if he's really the famous Eldomia. Icaf recognizes him as the one who defeated Dandere and questions him about his aura. With a serious look, Eldomia stares at the knight without showing any kind of fear. Responding rudely, he says that's none of the knight's business. Afterward, he accuses him of not being there when Revi needed help the most, but Revi interrupts the fight and takes full responsibility for the situation created. Explaining the situation, she says it's a political matter for a stranger. Outraged, Eldomia doesn't accept being called a stranger and becomes very angry. Offering a solution, the knight says that as his disciple, the story changes. With a smile, Revi reveals that she brought him there exactly for this proposal. Finishing the introduction, she reveals him as Ecaf, the king's third sword. Revealing everything, Ecaf states that he's already investigated the boy's entire past. He knows that Eldomia used to brag about being dangerous with the local bandits. Furthermore, he mentions the death of his parents 3 years before that. Hearing the provocation, Eldomia grinds his teeth with great anger and resentment. In an explosive movement, the boy lunges at the knight without hesitation. Then, he tries to land a direct blow to the face of the man in front of him, but the knight blocks the attack, holding his wrist very easily. Advising the boy, he warns him not to let emotions guide his movements. Next, Ecaf squeezes his hand with even more force than before. Managing to break free, Eldomia retreats and spins to prepare a new quick attack. Observing the action, the knight is slightly surprised by the boy's agility. Taking advantage of the opening, Eldomia manages to land a blow on the side of his body. With a smile, he celebrates having finally managed to land a single hit. At the same instant, his victorious expression changes to total despair. Looking down, he sees that Ecaf managed to catch his foot in the air. Fallen on the ground, he says he'd like to continue training with him, but the knight points to the injury, saying it's impossible now. Angrily, the boy shouts that he should have arrived earlier. To his surprise, Ecaf agrees and admits that he was totally right. Showing a vision, he explains that he can't always protect everyone. Touching his shoulder, he says there's only one thing to be done. He then declares that the only solution is to exterminate the demon army. For that, he states that they need talented warriors like the boy. Then, he invites him to be the sword of the kingdom alongside him. Hearing the proposal, the boy falls silent, processing the entire situation. Changing scenes, Eldomia walks to Asili, who waits near the house. As he approaches, he observes her from afar with a thoughtful look. Getting close to her, he calls her to begin their difficult conversation. With a sad look, she simply states that he's really leaving. After all, she knew this day would come, but not so suddenly. Then he explains that he'll do whatever it takes to become stronger. Thanking her for everything, he says that the last 3 years were incredible for him. Hearing this, Asilia turns to the side with a very serene expression. At that moment, the boy stares at her, waiting for one last answer from her. Then she turns with a smile and opens her arms to him. Surprised by the gesture, the boy is speechless for a moment. Soon after, He runs and the two embrace tightly near the tree. Shifting to the road, their carriage continues the long journey to the capital. Inside the vehicle, a different earring appears on the boy's left ear. At that moment, Revi notices the accessory and asks if he always wore that. Showing the earring, he explains that it was a special gift from Asilia, but the girl becomes curious and asks what the promise between them was. Back at the hill, Asilia watches the carriage move away in the distance. Remembering the promise, she smiles while wearing the other pair of the earring. Finally, the carriage arrives at the royal capital and stops in front of the mansion. Inside the mansion, a blonde girl complains about bringing the one who attacked her father. Crumpling a cloth in her hand, she simply can't understand his decision. Then, she grabs her sword forcefully, mentioning the name Eldomia Iga. Soon after, the girl declares that she'll show the terror of House Ogatolf. Continuing the journey, the carriage makes its way down the road through the dense forest. Inside, Revi explains that the country is divided between the nobles and the royalty. Being the sole survivor, she had no authority since she was still a minor. Because of this, the noble faction saw her as a useful pawn in the political conflict. Not understanding, Eldomia asks why she didn't seek help from the royal faction. She then reveals that the center of the family's restoration needed to be her. With a smile, Revi comments that people love a good story with drama. Asking for help, she would be seen only as a pathetic survivor without popular support. But she imagined a different scenario, reappearing as the legitimate and strong heir. Returning after years, the Marquis's daughter would swear total loyalty to the kingdom once more. With this, she would gain the people's support and solidify the royalty's position. Even understanding the plan, Eldomia still thinks it was a very reckless move on her part. At that, Ecaf reveals that she refused to tell them her location. The girl believed she needed to overcome the difficulties, but was saved in the end by Eldomia. Hearing the story, he smiles and says, "What matters is that she's safe." Approaching the capital, the carriage continues its journey down the wide open road. At that, Ecaf announces that they're finally almost at their final destination. A short time later, the carriage wheels stop moving on the ground. Stopping in front of the mansion, they arrive at the great house of the Ogatolf family. Already inside the place, Eldomia observes the decoration with Revi. Meanwhile, Revi asks the knight about the whereabouts of his daughter, Cheryl. He responds that she's at a rebellious age and has become quite aggressive. At that same instant, someone approaches and opens the door with great force. Appearing at the entrance, the knight's blonde daughter stares at the two guests seriously. With an intimidating look, she fixes her attention directly in the boy's direction. Right after, she stops right in front of him without saying a single word. Not recognizing the girl, he asks who she is, somewhat confused by the situation. Ignoring the question, the girl just shouts his name with great anger, but her father interrupts her and asks her to greet Lady Lagnus. Next, she turns and challenges Eldomia to a duel right then and there. Sighing, Ecaf seems tired, while Eldomia observes the scene with total disinterest. Trying to cover up, he says it's nothing more than a friendly fight. But Eldomia accepts the duel, saying he needed to stretch a bit anyway. With a smile on his face, he prepares excitedly to begin the combat. In the mansion courtyard, the two position themselves against each other. Worried, Revi asks if the duel should really happen between the two there. At that, Ecaf admits that no one can stop his daughter when she's angry. With sword in hand, Cheryl concentrates to initiate the first attack. Taking a step, the girl begins to run in her opponent's direction. Then she advances with the blade ready to land the first quick strike. On the first clash, the two swords cross with great force and sparks. While fighting, she yells at him for having insulted her dear father before. Refuting the accusation, he shouts that the invitation came from her father. Their blades lock against each other, measuring each one's strength. Right after, they pull back and continue exchanging blows throughout the mansion courtyard. Holding her sword firmly, the girl lunges forward with a strike. At that, Eldomia defends himself, and the two continue the duel with intensity. With a focused gaze, she decides to test her opponent's true strength. Then she attempts a quick attack that he manages to dodge at the last second. Noticing his dodge, she continues pressing without giving him any opening. Taking advantage of the movement, she spins her body and lands a hit on the sword. Holding the blade with both hands, she pushes him with force. Right after, she declares the end of the fight and advances for the final blow. But he plants his feet firmly on the ground and prepares for her counterattack. At the same instant, he spins his body and blocks the sword's blow. The swords clash again, showing the balance of strength between them. Pulling back a bit, he takes advantage of the distance to create a new opening. Not understanding the tactic, she's surprised by the boy's sudden movement. Suddenly, he releases his energy and prepares an attack with the sword. Seeing his power, she stares at him with a completely shocked look. Stopping the blow, Eldomia points the sword at her neck on the ground. With a bored look, he asks if she's satisfied with the fight. At that, she gets irritated and demands he finish the combat properly. Then he explains that he never insulted her father and won't be underestimated there. Hearing the outburst, She stares at him while he explains his determination to win. With a smile, he extends his hand and proposes they get along. Still irritated, Cheryl stares at his hand without showing any immediate reaction. At that, she slaps his hand away, refusing the peace proposal. Shouting with anger, she says he's going to run away, and he responds to the provocation. Watching the scene, Ecaf and Rivi comment on how similar the two are. With clenched fist, Eldomia shouts that he'll become even stronger than everyone. Cutting to the bedroom, he begins a routine of physical exercises on the floor. The scene shows him struggling alone, doing push-ups in his new room. Already outside, he begins his sword training under supervision. Next, he lands a powerful blow on the training dummy in front of him. Pulling a giant rock, he begins his heavy training routine. At the end of the day, he always passes out exhausted on his bed. Moving into summer, the green leaves show time passing slowly. Soon after, autumn arrives and the leaves begin to fall outside. Meanwhile, his sword training continues with the same intensity. He and Cheryl continue to duel, being closely observed by Ecaf. With sweat dripping, he remains focused throughout his entire practice. Then winter finally arrives, and snow covers the entire landscape. Even in the cold, he trains his energy control with bare feet. Shirtless in the snow, his body and mind are pushed to the extreme. With labored breathing, he endures the cold firmly to become stronger. Spring finally arrives, showing the end of a complete training cycle. New sprouts grow on the trees, symbolizing his progress during that year. Back in the bedroom, he continues his physical exercise routine on the floor. Next, he hears someone calling for him to hurry up. Entering the room, Cheryl complains about his delay in leaving for a mission. At that, she warns that if they delay any longer, they'll miss the best missions. Rising from the floor, he shows the result of his training and asks her to wait. Shifting to a hideout, we see the house of a group of bandits in the forest. Inside, one of them shows off the bag of coins they just stole. Handing over the loot, the men present themselves to the gang's leader there. Relaxed in his chair, the boss celebrates the success of their latest heist. He then plans a few more attacks before the guild starts to act. Letting out a laugh, he boasts about how he loves threatening his innocent victims. Hearing the conversation, Cheryl appears with disgust, calling them human trash. With that, she emerges from the shadows and prepares to attack the group of thieves. Suddenly, she appears from behind and places her sword at the boss's neck. Completely shocked, he doesn't understand how she managed to appear there without being noticed. The other bandits see the scene and cry out for their completely overpowered leader. Furious, she calls for Eldomia to finish them all off. Seeing there's more people, the bandits panic and try to guard the exits. Looking up, she rushes her partner with a very confident smile on her face. On the ceiling, Eldomia appears by surprise, ready to attack the thieves from above. Shocked, one of the bandits sees the figure that appeared on the hideout ceiling. Right after, Eldomia leaps from the wooden beam to attack the thieves below. Seeing him appear, the men panic at the boy's surprise attack. In a sequence of strikes, he advances and takes down several of them across the floor. With a furious look, he prepares to continue the attack against the others. Then, he hits one of the bandits with a strike, throwing him far away. At the same instant, another thief prepares to attack the boy with a club, but Eldomia manages to block the strike with his sword and defend himself from the attack. Preparing his sword, he focuses to finish off the last enemy standing. In a final blow, he strikes the remaining bandit's chest hard with force. Seeing his henchmen fall, the bandit boss panics at the scene. With all the henchmen defeated, Eldomia stands alone at the location. In total desperation, the boss begs on his knees for them to spare his life. He then offers all the money while Cheryl watches the scene with contempt. Removing his hood, Eldomia says, "Trash like him isn't worth it." Explaining he needs proof, he spares the bandit boss's life, but in exchange, he snaps his fingers and warns he'll make him remember. With a smile, he says the bandit will never forget the name Eldomia. Right after, a scream of pain echoes throughout the hideout in the forest. Changing scenes, they arrive at the Adventurers Guild in the royal capital. Handing over the reward, the receptionist confirms their mission's success with a smile. Taking the money, Eldomia thanks her with a very confident look, satisfied with the result. While he prepares to leave, Cheryl looks at a new mission on the board. Showing the paper, she mentions she'll have a long break from the academy starting tomorrow. Reading the mission, he realizes it's another job to deal with more bandits. With that, she explains the mission is for a group of 60 people at the vineyard. Still doubting the permission, he hears that she already has a great idea. Remembering the conversation, Cheryl threatens her father to get permission to go out on missions. Suddenly, the two notice a mysterious figure watching them from the window above. From his office, the guild master observes the boy from outside. Inside the guild, the master talks about a rookie who appeared a year ago. He reveals the boy crushes anyone, earning the nickname Mad Dog. Hearing the report, the hooded figure understands his abilities are real. The mysterious figure reacts silently to the information about the guild's new boy. Meanwhile, Eldomia smiles, thinking about his new nickname, Mad Dog. 2 days later at the vineyard, A large group of adventurers gathers for the mission. Observing the group, Eldomia and Cheryl wonder who the mission's client is. She points to a man with crossed arms, Baron Papayera of the countryside. Hearing the name, Eldomia is surprised by the rumor about his title. With that, the group's leader stands up and begins to explain the attack plan. Pointing to the forest, he says 20 armed bandits have taken over the ruins there. The plan is simple: form a line and advance all together into the forest. Hearing the strategy, Eldomia finds the plan very bad and poorly thought out by him. After all, the tactic makes no sense in a field as open as that location. Right after, the other adventurers also revolt against the terrible attack strategy. Watching the Baron, Eldomia agrees with his partner's suspicion there. He's certain the client is up to something with all of them. Trying to calm everyone down, the leader says the plan isn't mandatory, but he explains the Baron wants the bandits defeated quickly. With a smile, he says the Baron has a proposal for everyone. Anyone who advances will earn 5 silver coins as a bonus. Hearing the proposal, the adventurers grip their swords with more strength and determination. With the extra money, the group gets excited and decides to attack the bandits. Satisfied with the result, the mission leader smiles with a very malicious look. At the same instant, one of the adventurers understands the true intention behind the plan. Relaxing in his chair, Eldomia says they'll handle everything their own way. Not worrying about the money, he mocks and asks if there's a problem. Awkwardly, the mission leader tries to disguise his real intention with a laugh. With his face sweating, he gets nervous at the Mad Dog Boy's attitude. With that, he glances at the Baron, who continues watching everything from afar. Noticing the Baron's gaze, the mission leader becomes visibly nervous and tense. Then, he quickly agrees, letting the two act on their own in the attack. Turning their backs, they walk away while the leader realizes they're already gone. As they walk, Cheryl comments about the attack, and he confirms it's a trap. Even knowing this, he still tries to understand what the Baron is scheming, but she, with a serious look, already has a terrible suspicion about everything. Looking at him, she reveals that all the other adventurers will go to their deaths. In a dense and silent forest, sunlight barely makes it through. Hidden on the trail, a group of bandits prepares an ambush with their bows. 2 of them comment about rookies acting alone in that region. Then one of the men smiles, remembering the boss gave permission to eliminate them. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps breaks the silence of the woods. Overconfident, the bandit keeps talking about his easy victories from the past. But while he's distracted, a blade is unsheathed, very quietly. He can barely wait to see the expression of fear on his new victims. At the same instant, a figure moves quickly through the trees there. Leaping from above, Eldomia appears by surprise with his sword ready to attack. With no time to react, the man just stares at the threat coming from above. Right after, a single precise strike pierces through the bandit's body at speed. Seeing his partner fall, the other archer aims his arrow in total desperation. Ignoring the danger, Eldomia advances with his eyes shining very intensely. Finishing the fight, he lands a devastating blow right to the enemy's face. With the impact, the bandit's body is thrown forcefully against a tree, leaving him incapacitated and stuck in the trunk cracked by the force of the mortal blow. Noticing the commotion, the other bandits finally come out of their hiding spots to fight, but Eldomia doesn't even flinch, just calmly wiping the blood from his hand. Without wasting time, he already goes after the next targets that appeared. Advancing at high speed, he prepares to attack both of them at once. Readying his sword, he focuses on the first man running in his direction. Right after, he attacks the swordsman with a strike coming directly from above. While he deals with the first one, the archer in the back quickly prepares his arrow. Taking the chance, he aims carefully not to miss his only shot. Even with his back turned, Eldomia senses the danger and turns around right away. Spinning his body, he dodges the arrow that grazes past his shoulder. Seeing what happened, the archer can't believe his attack failed. Without giving him time to recover, Eldomia already advances with another strike. At that exact moment, the rest of the bandit group appears to surround him now. Surrounded by enemies, Eldomia faces the group advancing to attack, but a confident smile appears on his face without showing any kind of fear. Gripping his sword, he prepares to face all the bandits at once. Going back a bit in time, he was discussing his plan with Cheryl in the forest. At that moment, he was explaining confidently that he had a great strategy to act. Meanwhile, Cheryl didn't seem to believe much in the genius of his plan. After all, his only idea was simply to use brute force against everyone. Returning to the present, the result of the plan is scattered all over the ground. After the intense battle, he finally manages to breathe a bit more relieved now. With all this confusion, he knows the Baron will soon find out, so he looks to the sky, wondering if Cheryl found any useful clue. Seeing the only survivor, he decides he needs to retreat before reinforcements arrive. Getting close to the man, he pokes the unconscious bandit to wake him up. Slowly, the enemy starts to open his eyes, still a bit dazed from the blow. With a sinister smile, Eldomia prepares to get some important information from him. With a slap, the bandit wakes up completely startled without understanding anything right. Changing scenery, the search for clues continues in another part of the forest. Walking the trail, Cheryl finally finds the location she was looking for now. Watching from afar, she spots ruins that are probably the group's hideout. Analyzing the place better, she notices the camp seems to be totally empty, but looking more carefully, a strange detail ends up catching her attention. Over in the corner, there's a small warehouse too new for those old ruins. Very cautiously, she approaches and opens the door to investigate the interior. Inside, she finds a staircase leading to a very suspicious basement. Then she starts descending each step slowly to not make noise. Reaching down there, a horrible smell takes over the entire dark environment. Then she feels she just stepped on something wet on the floor. Looking down, she's completely shocked by what she just saw. Her face fills with horror as she realizes the terrible scene around her. Right in front of her, a pile of adventurers' bodies is thrown there. Meanwhile, Eldomia continues his interrogation about what the bandits were gathering. In fear, the man answers that they were collecting the bodies of adventurers. He reveals they're the victims of the Baron's first subjugation mission. Furious, Eldomia questions him about the reason for doing something so sick. Then the bandit confirms it was all a direct order from the noble. Right after, he asks where the rest of the bodies they gathered is stored. The man then reveals that the Baron's elite subordinates know how to use aura. Hearing this, Eldomia realizes Cheryl is in much greater danger. Shifting to the basement, she finds the identification of one of the dead adventurers. Analyzing the plate, she understands the Baron lured rookies with a mission. Suddenly, an unknown figure appears at the top of the dark basement stairs. Then the person starts descending the steps slowly in her direction. Turning around, she's startled to notice someone else's presence. Even with the threat, she keeps looking at the adventurers' bodies on the ground. With anger, she prepares to fight against the enemy approaching. From the outside, you can only hear a sound coming from inside. Shifting scenes, the Baron's vineyard looks pretty quiet for now. Nearby, a group of adventurers prepares for the noble's next mission. Meanwhile, Baron Papera confirms with his men if everything is ready. With a smile, he says they'll deal with any survivor who shows up. But right when he was thinking about the plan, someone comes running desperately. Arriving out of breath, the messenger brings urgent news directly from the forest to him. Hearing what happened, the Baron is shocked by the news received. Grinding his teeth, he can't believe his plan was totally ruined. So he orders his servant to make up an excuse to delay the other adventurers. Right after, the noble draws his sword with great anger at the situation. Determined, he himself goes to the forest to resolve everything with his own hands. Heading there, a very mysterious hooded figure accompanies his group. Without saying anything, the person just observes everything in complete and total silence. Returning to the cellar, the enemy's dagger is stuck in one of the bodies. At this moment, Cheryl fights fiercely against the man who attacked her there. Irritated with the Baron, the man threatens Cheryl with his bloodied blade. Analyzing the enemy, she realizes he's one of the group's leaders. Then, her sword begins to be wrapped by a strong combat energy. With no other choice, she prepares to fight with everything now. Then the two face each other in the middle of the bodies, ready for combat. Seeing the girl's power, the man is shocked and backs away for an instant. With a powerful blow, the warehouse wall is completely destroyed instantly. The attack's impact throws the man far away from the location. Amid the debris, she approaches the enemy who was defeated. Coming out of the smoke, she demands he tell her everything he knows, but he just laughs, warning that more people are coming to help. At the same instant, several footsteps are heard rapidly approaching the location. Suddenly, a huge group of bandits appears and surrounds the girl. Realizing the trap, she understands the situation got much more complicated. But looking to the side, she seems to notice something moving between the trees. With a slight smile, she reveals her confidence to the enemy there. Then she warns that she's also not alone in that great and difficult fight. Suddenly, Eldomia emerges in the air, totally surprising the enemy who was below. Seeing his arrival, the other bandits become completely paralyzed without any reaction. Advancing with everything, he passes by the two, landing a precise and quick strike. Desperate, the leader shouts for his men not to lower their guard now, but looking to the side, he realizes the girl suddenly disappeared. Without understanding anything, he sees the place is now totally empty. Taking advantage of the distraction, Cheryl appears from behind with her sword ready to attack. Then he turns around, facing the imminent attack coming in his direction. With no time to defend, she lands a blow that he blocks at the limit. With the impact's force, the enemy's blade ends up breaking there. Right after, she hits the man with a blow that completely disarms him. Meanwhile, Eldomia leaps to attack another enemy who was a bit away. Descending at high speed, he prepares the final blow to end everything. Finishing the fight, Eldomia finally stands over the last enemy's body. Remembering the warning, he didn't find any enemy who knew how to use aura. Coming from behind, Cheryl asks if he managed to find any important clue. Then she points to the cellar, revealing the pile of bodies inside. Irritated, she regrets not leaving an enemy alive to get information, but Eldomia reveals he left one alive to prove the Baron's guilt. Suddenly, a noise in the bushes catches both their attention there. Then he smiles, warning they'll soon find out what it is. At that very instant, heavy footsteps rapidly approach in their direction. Jumping by surprise, Baron Papayera attacks with his sword coming from above. Without hesitating, Eldomia turns and prepares his blade for the counterattack. Right after, the two swords clash, creating a great impact there. After the clash, he lands on the ground ready for the next move. Sensing the strength, he understands he finally found the aura user. With his sword, the noble prepares to fight against the two. Noticing the scene, the Baron is totally shocked by what happened. Then he sees the bodies of all his men scattered on the ground. With his plan ruined, he despairs for having lost his entire investment. At this moment, Eldomia questions him about the reason for killing so many adventurers. Ignoring the question, the noble advances with his sword to attack the two, but the boy blocks the blow, beginning a strong sword duel there. While they measure strength, the Baron reveals why he was gathering the bodies. Hearing the revelation, Eldomia is shocked by the coldness of his plan. Then the Baron explains he was going to use the bodies to forge his heroism. Even with the plan failing, he still believes he'll achieve his goal. Threatening the two, he says he'll use their bodies for his glory. Hearing that, Eldomia's expression changes completely with great anger now. Pushing the noble, he uses his strength to break the enemy's defense. Right after, he advances with a blow that hits the Baron squarely. With the precise blow, the noble is thrown back without any defense. With the blow's impact, the Baron is thrown to the ground with force. Without understanding anything, he tries to process what just happened there. Facing Eldomia, the noble realizes he couldn't even see the attack. With a furious look, he promises everyone will know about the Baron's crimes. Right after, he raises his sword to deliver the final blow to the enemy. Seeing the blade approach, the noble begs not to be killed there. Hearing the excuse, Eldomia doesn't believe the lie he just told. But hearing the word demons, his expression changes completely instantly. Then he reveals he was forced to obey the demon's orders. Beside him, Cheryl listens to the story without understanding what's happening. Asking once more, he wants to confirm if he heard the word demons. That word awakens an uncontrollable fury that takes over his entire body. Desperate, the Baron insists he was threatened with death by the fearsome demons. Beside him, Cheryl just watches the whole scene without understanding what's happening. Not believing the excuse, Eldomia says he's only lying to avoid death. Suddenly, a figure moves quickly past Eldomia in a blur. Seeing the new threat, the Baron swears he can lead them to the demons, but the hooded man appears and grabs him, silencing him for good. Turning around, Eldomia is surprised by the speed of the unexpected attack. With a dagger at his throat, the man stops the Baron from speaking further. Without any mercy, he executes the noble with a quick and fatal cut. Looking at the body on the ground, Eldomia is left without reaction to what he saw. Completely paralyzed, he can't believe what just happened right in front of him. Then the assassin laments that the Baron revealed the secret so easily before. Revealing his face, he finally introduces himself to the young swordsman present. Changing scenery, night falls over the city, bringing important new revelations. Already in a room, Cheryl confirms that the king's shadows really exist. She explains they're a secret agency that acts in the shadows of the kingdom, a group that stops at nothing to protect the crown's interests. At that, Cheryl says her father never gave many details about this organization. Then the man called Walter confirms he's part of their secret group. Moving to a room, she asks why they were brought to that location, but Eldomia interrupts him, questioning why he killed Baron Papayera. In response, Walter simply apologizes, saying the situation was an emergency. Angrily, he reveals that the Baron had demons supporting his evil plan. Hearing the accusation, Walter just smiles without seeming to care about the loss. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupts the tense conversation. Right after, a man in a suit appears at the door offering to explain. Introducing himself, he says he's Engrim, the master of the local adventurers guild. Upon learning this, Eldomia realizes the conspiracy runs even deeper. Sitting in front of them, Engrim apologizes for the guild's lack of supervision, but as he sits, he pauses before continuing to speak. Refusing to answer, the guildmaster claims the matter is confidential. Irritated by the lack of answers, Eldomia stands up and questions that decision. Unfazed, he just smiles while preparing his next proposal for them. Then he offers a deal, promising information in exchange for a special favor. Still suspicious, the young man asks what kind of request he has in mind. Being a bit mysterious, he says he can't give many details. Revealing the truth, he says the mission involves the Demon King's army. Hearing the confirmation, she understands that demons are really involved in this. At that moment, his hand trembles with rage as he remembers his past. Remembering that day, he relives the attack that took everything he had. With a face full of hatred, he stares at those responsible for all his pain. Grinding his teeth, he shows his enormous desire for revenge to the man. So, Determined to avenge himself, he accepts the dangerous request from the master. Right after, Walter stands up and calls them to go to another place. Preparing for what's coming, she stretches to fight against demons, but when she tries to go along, the guildmaster stops her. Explaining the situation, he says her involvement would bring too many political problems. Understanding the complication, she just sighs, quite frustrated with everything. Seeing Eldomia leave, she suddenly calls him for one last important warning. Asking seriously, she tells him not to do anything crazy on the mission. With a smile, he says goodbye and goes with Walter to the agreed location. Then she stays behind, just watching the two leave through the room's door. Alone, she remains standing with a very serious expression on her face now. Changing to a cemetery, the conversation about the mission continues between the two. At the location, Walter begins talking about the increase in bandit attacks. At that, he reveals the bandits were just following someone's orders. Right after, he explains the enemy's real objective is something else entirely. Telling the truth, he says, demons infiltrated near the royal capital. Then he reveals the bandits are just a big and useful distraction. Questioning the plan, Eldomia asks why they don't use the kingdom's army. Explaining the choice, he says they need someone discreet and very skilled. Then Walter details that the mission is to find and capture the demons alive. Handing over a paper, he gives the final instructions to the young swordsman now. Upon receiving the note, Eldomia discovers he'll have company on the dangerous mission. At that, he warns that fighting unknown demons would be far too dangerous alone. Guaranteeing the quality, he says the partners were chosen by the master. Changing scenery, night arrives and he goes to the agreed location. Arriving at the address, he finds a large inn in the middle of the city. Preparing to enter, he puts on his hood to avoid drawing any attention. Very carefully, he opens the front door to enter the place. Inside, he encounters a tavern packed with various adventurers drinking. Analyzing the location, he tries to figure out who his new secret partners are. But suddenly, an unbelievable scene ends up catching his complete attention there. Right in front of him, a huge banner welcomes him with his name. Just below, a group of very flashy adventurers waits for him at the table. Not believing what he saw, Eldomia is completely paralyzed by the far from discreet reception. At that, one of the adventurers at the table notices his presence and stops drinking. Confirming his name out loud, she calls him to join the group. Then he realizes the guildmaster chose the flashiest team possible. Sitting down at the table with the group, he stares at them with his arms crossed. Then he questions whether they were really chosen by the guildmaster. Pointing irritably, he reminds the warrior who gave them the mission. Right after, he complains about them drawing so much attention from others in the place. Seeing the woman shout loudly, he asks her to speak a little lower. With an irritated face, he realizes the mission will be much more complicated. Ignoring the scolding, the warrior Ekaterina introduces herself with a confident smile to him. Next, the hooded girl introduces herself as the mage Relie very timidly. Seeing her shyness, he becomes worried about her experience in dangerous missions. Then he turns to the last member, a dwarf focused on a drawing. With his eyes fixed on the paper, the man continues his art, ignoring everyone. Realizing he was ignored, Eldomia gets even more irritated with his new partner. Laughing at the situation, Ekaterina introduces the dwarf Gigan, who loves to spend time drawing. With a team like this, his expression fills with total and pure despair. With nothing to do, he watches the noisy group wanting to leave that place. Seeing the banner with his name, he says he doesn't need to introduce himself. Excited, Ekaterina reveals she's eager to fight alongside the rabid dog. Confused, she explains that his nickname comes from his way of fighting ferociously. Hearing his nickname, he feels disappointed it's not something cooler. Suddenly, a commotion at another table ends up catching everyone's attention. Back there, a man argues with the tavern owner. Irritated, the owner demands payment for what the man ate and drank. Pointing at the owner, the drunk man doesn't seem to care about the debt. Showing a card, he says that soon, everyone there will be his faithful servants. Watching the scene, he stares at the man with a very suspicious look now. To resolve the fight, the man's friend pays the bill and calms him down. Arms around each other, the two leave the tavern, thanking them for the meal they had there. Asking her partner, Ekaterina comments on the drunk man's suspicious behavior. At that, the mage Relie suspects they might be humans allied with demons. With a sinister smile, Ekaterina suggests they can extract information from them, but he refuses the idea, suggesting they follow the group for now. Hugging him, Ekaterina praises the intelligence of the plan he just created. At night, the group of suspects walks along a trail in the dark forest. Hidden in the bushes, they watch the group pass by with a lit lantern. Seeing the suspects going into the woods, Relie thinks it's dangerous to follow on unknown terrain. With a plan in mind, he begins to use one of his abilities. Seeing the scene, Relie is shocked without understanding what's happening. Then he creates a small energy butterfly with his hands to track them. Releasing the creature, he sends it to follow the group discreetly. With the tracker, they can keep a safe distance and still observe everything. Impressed, Relie asks how he managed to use a spirit like that there. Changing the subject, He says they need to hurry so they don't lose them. Without wasting time, he already starts moving to the next part. Following the trail from afar, they advance through the dark and silent forest. Getting close, he hides and observes the group's final destination. At the location, they find the entrance to a cave that looks like a dungeon. From inside it, a mysterious voice complains about the group's delay in returning. Hearing the voice, he feels a chill and goes on high alert. Suddenly, a figure with horns begins to emerge from the cave's darkness. Seeing the horns, he's certain he's facing one. With wide eyes, fear takes over his expression for an instant. Coming out of the cave, a tall and imposing demon stares at the group of humans. Hidden, he watches the scene unfold, paying close attention to important details. The demon called Enchanter questions why they didn't follow his direct orders. Afraid, the group apologizes, saying they got carried away on their first break. But the drunk man ignores the danger and responds in a very mocking way. Dissatisfied, he thinks he deserves better treatment than that there. Hearing the affront, the demon's expression changes completely in a frightening way. Then he grabs the man's face forcefully to shut his mouth. Without hesitation, he squeezes with even more violence. With a single strike, the man's head is completely crushed instantly. Seeing the brutal scene, the rest of the group becomes totally terrified with fear. Hidden, the group of adventurers is also shocked by the demon's violence. Then the demon stares at the body, complaining about the dead human's audacity. With contempt, he orders the rest of the group to get rid of the body now. Right after, he promises they will all be rewarded for their loyalty to the group. Still in panic, they just agree with the order without complaining about anything. Watching the demon, Ekaterina realizes the rumors about him are true. Noticing the silence, she turns to Eldomia to see if he's okay. With a tense smile, he remembers everything he lost in the past. Clutching his chest, he feels the scars the demons left on him. With a look of pure vengeance, he says he finally found his targets. While the humans carry the body, the demon just watches from afar. Hidden, the group of adventurers keeps following the entire scene with attention. Seeing them enter the cave, Ekaterina already prepares to invade the place, but Eldomia stops her, asking her not to attack without a plan first. Suddenly, the demon turns around, hearing the noise coming from the bushes. With a smile, he stares at the exact direction where they're hiding. Realizing the trap, Eldomia pulls Ekaterina to the ground and covers her mouth. Then the demon starts walking slowly in their direction without any hurry. Worried, he stares at the enemy approaching closer and closer to their hideout. With each step, the tension in the air increases in a really terrifying way now. Sweating cold, he prepares for the combat that seems inevitable there. But suddenly, the demon advances in another direction with a quick strike. Attacking the air, he cuts the bushes with a single movement of his hand. Analyzing the place, he finds only the remains of the tracking spell there. Seeing no one, he thinks it was just his imagination and returns. Under the moonlight, they finally feel a little safer. With the danger passing, the group manages to breathe relieved after so much fright. Laughing at the situation, Ekaterina celebrates that they weren't discovered by the deadly enemy. Irritated, he turns around and starts scolding the warrior. Trying to defend herself, she says the final goal is to defeat the enemies. Angrily, he explains that invading without a plan would be a fatal mistake. Pointing at her, he says that if she doesn't take it seriously. Then he turns to the rest of the group with the same serious warning. Turning his back, he says he needs to succeed in this important mission. With a determined face, he faces his objective of discovering the enemy plans. Decided, he warns that he'll go in alone, and to notify the master. Not knowing what to do, the group stays behind without any reaction. Shifting to a cliff, he observes the cave from a strategic point. Hooded, he prepares to invade the demon's hideout alone. Analyzing the entrance, he plans to attack the guard during the shift change, but he changes his mind, deciding he needs to map the cave first. Suddenly, someone touches his shoulder and surprises him from behind. Turning around, he sees the dwarf Gigan holding a rolled paper for him. Not understanding, he takes the paper and starts opening it to see. Upon opening, he discovers a detailed map of the demon's dungeon there. Shocked by what he sees, he can't believe the map is real. Then the mage R'lyeh explains that Gigan drew the map for the mission. Remembering the scene, he understands what the dwarf was doing at the tavern. Grateful, he makes a thumbs-up sign to Gigan, who returns the gesture. At this moment, Ekaterina approaches to talk to him about what happened. With a serious look, she apologizes for not taking the mission seriously. With his face bruised, he says it's okay, since he didn't either. Then she promises she won't question his motives on the dangerous mission anymore. Confirming the seriousness, the other group members show their total commitment. Extending her hand, she asks them to fight together as a team. Hearing the request, he stays silent for a brief moment of reflection. Turning his back, he regrets having lost control of his emotions before. Closing his fist, he feels frustrated for not being able to do anything alone. With a determined look, he turns around to accept the warrior's proposal. Shaking hands, they finally seal the agreement to work together as one. With a smile, he says he'll make up for his failure in the important mission. Then he gathers the group, ready to create an efficient attack plan. Meanwhile, the cave guard continues his watch in a very calm way. Very sleepy, he yawns without noticing the approach of a new danger, but a strange noise makes him turn back in a state of alert. Suddenly, a figure appears in front of him with very heavy steps now. With a smile on her face, Ekaterina prepares to start the next part. Gathered, the group analyzes the map to understand the dungeon structure inside. Pointing to the map, Eldomia says the back room is suspicious. Then he offers to be the bait and distract the enemy's attention. With a wink, Ekaterina offers to be the bait instead. With a smile, she says this attack role is perfect for her. Holding her hammer, she prepares to fight with everything she's got now. Hearing a scream, the guard turns around, not understanding what's happening. Wasting no time, she runs at high speed in the enemy's direction there. With her hammer in hands, she yells for all the demons to come out. With a jump, she prepares to deliver the final blow on the guard. Leaping in the air, she attacks with a powerful strike coming from above. The hammer's impact creates a huge explosion of dirt on the ground. With the dust settling, the cave entrance becomes totally exposed and vulnerable. Beside the fallen guard, she prepares for the next enemies coming. Laughing at the situation, she seems satisfied with the damage she just caused. Turning back, she warns that it's their chance to invade now. Thanking the help, he prepares to start the invasion of the enemy hideout. With the team gathered, they enter the cave for their dangerous mission. Inside a dark castle, a mysterious commotion begins to take over the place. Turning slowly, the demon enchanter notices that something strange is happening outside. Just then, one of his subordinates comes running in, warning about an attack at the main entrance. Meanwhile, another guard is brutally hurled far away by a very powerful strike. Leaping through the air, the white-haired invader hits the fallen guard with another blow. Watching the scene, Enchanter furrows his brow and bares his teeth in anger. Beside the body, the invader and his hooded accomplice observe the result of the attack. Then his servant suggests they prepare to retreat before other enemies arrive, but Enchanter ignores the advice, ordering that the original plan continue without any changes. Even with sweat on his face, the subordinate only confirms his superior's order. Then, he decides to intervene personally, taking a firm step toward all the chaos. At the same instant, he extends his hand forward, preparing to use his power. Mobilizing quickly, a group of guards runs together to try to contain the great threat. Advancing in formation, they prepare to intercept the enemy at any cost possible. Suddenly, they stop motionless, their eyes widening as they see Eldomia appear at the door. Hidden in the corner, Eldomia confirms that the enemy's attention is focused on the entrance. Then, he turns to Gigan and points out the alternative path through the back of the place. But when he looks back, he realizes that someone from his group stayed behind. Nearby, the mage Raleigh was sitting on the ground, trembling and unable to move. With her eyes tightly shut, she remained paralyzed by the anxiety of the imminent danger situation. Hearing her name being called, the girl finally opens her eyes in fright. Seeing her state, Eldomia extends his hand to help her get up from the ground. Still a bit shaken, she looks away, explaining that she's very nervous about everything. At the same instant, he just listens in silence, while she continues venting about her fear. Hearing his response, the mage is surprised by her companion's words. With a smile, Eldomia admits that he also feels his heart racing before battles, but he explains that he focuses only on the mission's objective to overcome this paralysis. Hearing the explanation, she seems to understand that she also needs to focus on her purpose there. Reflecting for a second, the girl grips her staff harder and makes up her mind. Then, she raises her face with new determination, ready to continue the invasion. Running through the tunnel, Eldomia warns that they're almost reaching the castle's central hall. Shifting scenes, the fight continues intense outside that same fortress. Shouting defiantly, Ekaterina prepares for the attack of several enemies at once. With a swing of her hammer, she throws one of the adversaries far into the air. Right after, the man falls hard to the ground, while the others look terrified. Completely shocked, one of the remaining guards shouts angrily at the powerful red-haired warrior. Without wasting time, she raises her weapon again to deliver another very strong blow. Then, she spins her body and hits all the remaining enemies with a single attack. Taking a step forward, she approaches to finish the combat once and for all. On the ground, all the guards are down and defeated by the great warrior's strength. With a mocking smile, she looks at the bodies, finding it all too easy. Suddenly, she feels a powerful presence approaching from behind her without warning. Gritting her teeth, she prepares to face the real challenge that just arrived. Just then, Enchanter appears and blocks the blow of her hammer using only one hand. With the force of the impact, Ekaterina is pushed back, dragging her feet on the ground. With a confident smile, she taunts the demon, saying that he finally decided to show up. Standing in front of her, Enchanter just observes the warrior with a very intimidating look. He remains silent for an instant, analyzing the situation and his adversary. At this moment, she realizes that her role there was only to distract the main enemy. With a slight smile, he finally understands that the heroes used a clever decoy. Looking at the warrior, he admits that their plan wasn't bad at all. Then, he says he'll finish all of this quickly, gathering power in his hand. Even sweating nervously, Ekaterina doesn't back down and challenges the demon to try his luck. Changing scenes, the invasion continues happening in the dark corridors of the great castle. Running up front, Eldomia hurries his companions, saying they're already reaching the target. Right after, they finally spot the large gate that leads to the hall. But before they get there, Eldomia stops suddenly, planting his foot hard on the ground. Behind him, R'lyeh and Jigen also stop, looking surprised at what's happening. Out of nowhere, a portal opens in the floor, pulling the entire group inside. Nearby, one of Enchanter's servants finishes using his teleportation magic. Arriving in the hall, they come face to face with a portal and are quite shocked. There in the center, a huge teleportation gate was being built by the enemies. In disbelief at the scene, Eldomia grits his teeth and questions the reason for the construction. Then, with no time to lose, he pushes hard to advance against the enemy. At the same instant, he leaps toward the portal, aiming at the mage down below. Down below, the enemy mage notices the attack and gets irritated by the interruption. Shouting for them to leave, he extends his hand to use a new spell. Right after, a red magic circle forms rapidly on the floor of that hall. At the exact moment of landing, the trap activates right beneath his feet. With no way to escape, he widens his eyes, realizing the danger of the magic. Just then, a massive fire explosion completely consumes the entire trap location. Celebrating victory, the enemy mage smiles, thinking his plan worked. But suddenly, a protective barrier cuts through the flames and blocks the attack. Emerging unharmed from the fire, Eldomia advances, protected by a defensive spell. With eyes wide open, the enemy is shocked by the speed of that new magic. Right behind, R'lyeh maintains the barrier active and shouts for Eldomia to continue the attack. Seizing the chance, he leaps again toward the mage near the portal. Extending his hand once more, the enemy prepares a quick counterattack against him. Then, his sword clashes against another barrier, which defends the mage. With great force, the energy field manages to stop the blow completely. Noticing the defense, Eldomia is surprised that the enemy can also use a barrier. Suddenly, his eyes widen as he sees a new danger forming there. Behind the first mage, a second enemy appears preparing a new fire attack. Launching a fire strike, the second mage attacks the hero with full force. At that moment, a nearby wall breaks with an impact coming from below. Coming out of the hole, Jigen hits the mage with a blow from his work tool. Completely surprised, the enemy doesn't understand where the totally unexpected attack came from. Seizing the chance, the dwarf prepares another blow while the mage is still distracted. Right after, he hits the enemy with a powerful blow, throwing him far away. Seeing his ally fall, the first mage turns around, losing all his concentration. Noticing the opportunity, Eldomia prepares for a quick counterattack against the main enemy. He focuses power into the sword, preparing the blow that will break the defensive barrier. Quickly, the mage turns and tries to strengthen his defense using both hands, but the sword pierces through the barrier, hitting the enemy with a devastating blow. With his face wounded, the mage screams in pain from the impact of the direct hit. Without wasting time, Eldomia lands a second blow directly to the adversary's face. Then, he throws the enemy to the ground and lands another blow to the head. Then, he lifts the fallen mage, gripping him forcefully by the collar of his clothes. Holding the enemy, Eldomia asks the reason for building that suspicious portal. With a mocking smile, the mage refuses to give any kind of information. Hearing the refusal, Eldomia grits his teeth in anger at the enemy's provocation. Right behind, R'lyeh warns that the portal was almost complete when they finally arrived. Spinning non-stop, the gate's energy becomes stronger and more unstable. Determined to act, he stands up and says he'll destroy everything by himself now. But his companion stops him, explaining that the plan is truly very dangerous. She reveals that a portal of that size consumes an absurd amount of magical power. Shocked by the revelation, he widens his eyes and becomes completely without reaction. With nothing he can do, he just grits his teeth in frustration with the problem. Then, he presses the sword again to the neck of the fallen mage. Shouting at the enemy, he demands to know how to destroy the portal safely. Even threatened with death, the mage keeps smiling in a very mocking and irritating way. Losing patience, Eldomia lands a violent blow to the fallen prisoner's face. With his face bloodied, the mage repeats that he'll never help a human like him. Head down, Eldomia hears the provocation about the inevitable victory of his enemies. Covering his face with his hand, he insists that the mage finally speak the truth. But the enemy just laughs, saying there's nothing he can do now. Losing patience completely, he attacks the fallen mage with a violent blow. Then, he grabs the enemy's hand with great force, preventing any kind of magic. With eyes blazing with rage, he demands to know how to destroy the portal immediately. In an attack of fury, he begins to land several direct blows on the adversary. Seeing the scene, R'lyeh is shocked by the uncontrolled violence of her great companion. Beside her, Gigan and the other mage watch the scene completely paralyzed by fear. With bloodied fist, he shouts repeatedly, wanting to know the reason for all of that. Going back in time, he remembers the day his village was completely destroyed. In the present, he explodes in fury, demanding an answer for all his pain. Suddenly, a hand grabs his arm, stopping the attack midway. Not understanding anything, he turns to see who interrupted his rage attack. It was Gigan, who looked at him with a serious expression, asking him to stop. As he regains calm, Eldomia seems to have noticed something at the back of the hall. Looking at the enemy's body, he finally understands the situation they got themselves into. Then, he grits his teeth in frustration, blaming himself for his recent emotional loss of control. Turning to his friends, he admits that he let himself be carried away by rage and went too far. At that very moment, they hear a strange noise coming from the end of that corridor. Slowly, firm footsteps begin to approach the group in the room of the great portal. Fallen on the ground, Ekaterina appears completely defeated and without strength to manage to stand up. Seeing the scene, R'lyeh's eyes widen with fear and surprise. Right after, Encantor appears, holding the red-haired warrior by the hair without any difficulty. Recognizing the demon, Eldomia becomes paralyzed, staring fixedly at his great friend. Breaking into a cold sweat, he finally understands the size of the danger everyone is facing now. Going back in time, he had asked if she would be okay alone in the distraction. Asking her to flee, he explained that the plan was just to draw attention. But smiling with confidence, she promised she would finish everything and return right after. Back to the present, the demon drags the warrior across the floor like a trophy. Looking at her, he says that in the end she was no match for him. Gripping his sword tight, Eldomia prepares to advance against the great demon. Then he leaps with everything toward Encantor, aiming for a direct attack. Screaming with rage, he demands to know what happened to his friend. In response, the demon throws Ekaterina's body straight toward his attack. Seeing this, Eldomia is completely shocked, not knowing how to dodge her body. With no other choice, he abandons his attack to catch his friend in his arms. Taking advantage of the distraction, Encantor advances to land a direct hit on both of them together, but Eldomia manages to turn in time, blocking the strike while protecting the warrior. With her eyes closed, the warrior appears unconscious after that great battle. Desperate, he screams her name, begging her to stay with him. In that moment, his eyes begin to glow, releasing a hidden and mysterious power. Seeing the change, the demon attacks again, trying to end the fight for good. But Eldomia takes the hit directly to his face, without feeling the impact of the attack. Then an unknown force hurls Encantor's body away with tremendous violence. Right after, the great castle gate slams shut, sealing everyone inside. Surprised by the force of the explosion, Encantor stares, unable to understand what happened. Managing to stop his fall, Eldomia stomps hard on the ground to recover his balance. Right after, he adjusts himself, carefully holding Ekaterina's body in his arms. With his face bloodied, he faces the demon with a look of pure determination. Seeing he's still standing, Encantor can't hide his great surprise. Then he kneels on the ground, placing his friend in a safer spot. Analyzing his opponent, he notices a new and strange sensation coming from the boy. Clenching his fist tight, he tries to understand the origin of that unknown power. Meanwhile, Gigan appears from behind, trying to land a blow to the demon's head. But with a quick movement, Encantor dodges the attack, turning his body. Attempting to land the strike, the pickaxe hits his arm and breaks into pieces. Looking at the shards, he's surprised to see the weapon was just a pickaxe. At that moment, a magical attack is fired from afar toward the great villain. Hitting his back square on, the light strike causes a small explosion. Turning his face, he just looks with contempt, seeming to have suffered no damage. Standing up, R'lyeh prepares to attack with all her accumulated magical power. Shouting with determination, she fires a sequence of light strikes against the enemy. The attacks hit the demon, but he manages to defend against the blows with ease. Looking at the mage, he seems only slightly irritated by the attacks received. Dodging the projectiles, he decides he'll eliminate the mage first, once and for all. Then he advances at high speed, extending his hand to attack the girl. But seeing his approach, R'lyeh just smiles somewhat confidently. Not understanding her reaction, Encantor is surprised and stops for an instant. Suddenly, a hand emerges from the ground, breaking the stones right beneath his feet. Grabbing his leg, Gigan prevents him from continuing to advance against his great friend. With tremendous strength, the dwarf holds the demon, pinning him completely in place. Trapped on the ground, he tries to break free, but the trap is very strong. Looking down, he seems furious at having fallen for such a simple trick. Seizing the chance, R'lyeh prepares a new and powerful magical attack against the demon. With a war cry, she fires the strike with full force against him. With her staff, she launches a massive explosion of light against the enemy. Hit square on, the demon is thrown far away by the force of the impact. He manages to recover in the air, landing on his feet with agility on the ground. In the same instant, he advances with speed toward his true opponent. Suddenly, he stops and looks surprised to the side, sensing a presence. Appearing out of nowhere, Eldomia attacks with a powerful strike from top to bottom, but Encantor defends the attack, catching the blade with just one hand. He forces the sword downward, trying to break through the demon's defense with everything. Perceiving the tactic, the demon just stares at the hero with a mocking look. Still holding the blade, he stops the advance of the strike without any difficulty. Then he prepares a counterattack, hitting the hero with several very rapid blows. With his eyes glowing, he concentrates power in his fist for a finishing attack. But Eldomia reacts in time, blocking the strike with his sword's blade. Without losing rhythm, the demon prepares another powerful blow with his left fist. Suddenly, a new light magic appears and advances toward the demon. Being hit by the light strike, the demon gets irritated with the mage's interference. Looking in her direction, he regrets not having eliminated the girl right at the start. Beside him, R'lyeh stands firm, ready to continue providing support in the battle. Seeing his distraction, Eldomia shouts for the enemy to focus back on him. Seizing the chance, he advances and lands a direct hit to the demon's chest. Stomping hard on the ground, he prepares for a new sword attack. Then he spins his body and lands a strike from bottom to top on his adversary. Piercing through his back, the sword seems to have ended the fight for good. But suddenly he widens his eyes upon realizing something strange happened there. On the other side, the blade is stopped by the demon's body without any difficulty. With a smile, Encantor praises their strength, acknowledging they were worthy opponents. Then, he uses his power to push the sword out of his body. Clenching his fist tight, he begins to release all his hidden power. At the same instant, his clothes begin to tear with the growth of his muscles. With his body larger, he prepares to fight with full strength against everyone. But even frightened, Eldomia prepares to face the great enemy's new form. Screaming with fury, the demon promises to kill everyone and complete his grand plan. Flashing back in time, a training dummy takes several powerful strikes in quick succession. There stood young Eldomia, practicing his sword movements with intense force and determination. Suddenly he stops training when he hears a familiar voice calling out to him. Irritated, Asili questions what he thinks he's doing with that kind of training. Then she reveals that he was using raw magical power without any kind of control. To explain better, she compares this energy to extremely hot and unstable molten metal. Next, she shows that aura solidifies this energy for safe attack and defense. Mana, on the other hand, serves to convert the power into different forms and elements of nature. Worried, she warns that using power that way could hurt him very badly. Hearing this, she's completely shocked to learn he's been training like this for years. With a smile, he thinks the idea of being wrapped in molten metal is super cool. Noticing her silence, he asks if everything's okay with his sister. Thoughtful, she says only 2 races can use this type of raw power. Not understanding, he asks what this other race would be besides his own, but she just looks away, staying silent and hiding the truth from him. But she changes the subject, saying they'll talk about it after training. Hearing her promise, he seems to calm down and looks forward again. Then she warns that he'll end up discovering everything if he continues with his goal. Back to the present, he faces the demon who uses the same power as him. Sensing the energy, he realizes the enemy also uses raw magical power. At that, the demon grins and advances, preparing a direct strike with a closed fist. Defending quickly, he manages to block the attack using his sword blade. Even with the force of the blow, he stands firm, holding back the enemy's advance. Then the demon attacks again, landing a hit right on Eldomia's face. Continuing the assault, he lands a sequence of blows, knocking the hero down. Without giving him time to breathe, he prepares another powerful blow with his left arm. Right after, he spins his body and lands a strike that sends Eldomia flying. Being thrown backward, he soars through the hall with the force of the massive impact. Gritting his teeth in pain, he looks at the enemy, appearing quite injured. On the ground, he slams hard into a pillar, finally stopping his movement. Worried, R'lyeh screams her friend's name, seeing him fallen on the ground. Then the demon turns to her, deciding he'll attack the mage first. Gathering power in his hand, he prepares for a ranged attack against her. Right after, he fires an energy projectile that flies at high speed. With her staff, she creates a mana barrier to protect herself from the blow, but the barrier shatters, being completely destroyed by the force of the massive attack. Taking a direct hit, she flies away, coughing up blood from the impact of the blow. At the same instant, the demon advances with speed to finish off the fallen mage. Jumping in the air, he prepares a downward strike against the girl. Suddenly, the ground breaks with a force coming from below the earth. Looking back, he sees Gigan emerging from the hole, ready to attack again. With a quick strike, the dwarf manages to hit the demon's face square on. With the force of the impact, he's thrown backward, moving away from the mage. Turning around, he realizes Eldomia is no longer lying on the ground. Looking to the side, he sees the rubble of the pillar where he had been. Emerging from the hole, Gigan prepares to attack the demon with his pickaxe. Jumping in the air, he tries to land a direct hit, but the enemy is fast. Eyes widening, he realizes the demon suddenly vanished from his sight. Irritated by the distraction, Enchanter grits his teeth and decides to finish the dwarf. With a stomp on the ground, he advances at high speed toward Gigan. With a brutal blow, he strikes the dwarf, sending him flying with tremendous force. His body slams into the wall, creating a cloud of dust with the impact. Looking at the fallen heroes, he now has total control of the situation. On the ground, Eldomia props himself up, not understanding the source of the enemy's power. Then Enchanter uses his power to lift one of the mages who was lying down. Ordering him to complete the portal, he prepares for the final part of the plan. At the same instant, the mage runs and begins feeding the portal with energy. With his face bloodied, Eldomia tries to understand the power of his large and strong enemy. Then he stands up, trying to think of a way to stop that monster. Gathering power in his hand, he prepares for the final confrontation against Enchanter. Gathering power in his hand, Enchanter prepares for a ranged attack against him. Suddenly, he stops the attack and his eyes widen as he notices something different. Remembering the conversation, he realizes he can use the same technique as the enemy. With a determined smile, he decides he'll risk everything on this new strategy. Then he stomps hard on the ground and advances against the demon with speed. Turning quickly, Enchanter is surprised by the blue-haired boy's courage. Screaming with everything, he advances, preparing a direct strike with his right fist closed. Mocking his attitude, the demon prepares for the counterattack without moving. But before attacking, he throws a handful of sand in the enemy's eyes. Jumping in the air, he prepares for a downward strike. Surprised by the trick, Enchanter gets irritated with the boy's dirty tactic. Taking the chance, he draws his sword, ready to finish the fight for good. With the enemy blinded, he manages to climb onto the demon's back without being seen. Then he drives the sword full force into his great adversary's shoulder. Screaming in pain, the demon becomes furious at being wounded that way. Still with the sword embedded, he explains that the demon's power is unstable. He reveals that his body can't handle that much power, and that there's a limit. With a look of rage, Enchanter realizes his weakness has been discovered by the boy. With a smile, he decides to test his theory, forcing more power into the enemy. Then the demon's body begins to explode from not withstanding the overload. Desperate, he screams for Eldomia to get away and stop injecting more power. But with his face covered in blood, he ignores the plea and continues the attack. Enraged, the demon prepares for a desperate and finishing counterattack. He gathers all his remaining energy in his hand for one last massive blow. Suddenly, he releases the power, making the boy's body glow intensely. With his hand open, he releases all the power accumulated in his body. Then, a beam of energy fires from within him, counterattacking the demon's strike. The attack crosses the hall, and the demon's body explodes into several pieces. Suddenly, Ekaterina stands up, holding Encantor so he can't escape the blow. Surprised, he doesn't understand how she can still stand after everything. Screaming with all her strength, she asks Eldomia to finish off the great enemy. Then the boy concentrates power in his sword, preparing the final blow of that battle. Charging forward with everything, he hits the demon with a devastating strike to the head. With his body broken, Encantor falls to the ground, completely defeated by the double attack. With a kick and a punch, the two heroes attack the demon at the same time. Then, a ray of power pierces through his body, ending the great battle. Screaming in pain, he explodes into pieces from the force of the combined attack. Far from there, the subordinate mage sees his master defeated by the two heroes. Even so, he receives the final order to complete the construction of the great portal. In the last second, he casts a fire spell to distract the two heroes. With his hand, the mage tries to create a barrier to defend himself from the attack, but Release stomps hard on the ground, advancing with speed against her enemy. Then, she leaps into the air, preparing a strike with her staff against the mage. Screaming with rage, she descends with everything to stop the portal plan. With her staff, she lands a direct hit on the arm of the running mage. The impact throws him to the ground, interrupting the magic he was preparing. But looking to the side, she realizes something is still happening. Fallen, he reveals it was too late, activating a magic circle on the ground. In the same instant, the ground begins to glow and energy flows to the portal. With the final activation, the portal begins to spin with very unstable energy. In its center, a core of power forms, completing the entire construction. In front of the heroes, the portal completes itself, shining with a strong light. Seeing the scene, Eldomia screams desperately, not knowing what to do against that. From inside, an evil laugh echoes, revealing the true threat that would arrive. In the center of the portal, a powerful arm emerges, preparing to come out. Screaming in pain, the demon seems to be preparing for one last desperate attack. With his bloodied face, Eldomia realizes the enemy will release all his power. In the same instant, an energy explosion throws the two heroes far from there. Bracing himself on the ground, Eldomia understands the enemy use the power to push them away. With his wounded body, he just watches as the demon begins to run away. Leaving the portal behind, he flees to the opposite side of the Great Hall. In the center, the portal keeps spinning, while R'lyeh and Gigin recover from the blow. Holding his sword, he prepares to chase the demon trying to escape. Celebrating victory, the enemy shouts that their kingdom is completely finished now. But suddenly he stops and looks to the side, sensing a strange presence. With his sword on the ground, Eldomia releases a powerful and unknown energy from his body. Screaming with fury, he says he won't let the demon leave there alive. Then, he stomps hard on the ground, preparing to charge with everything. With a burst, he shoots at high speed, leaving a trail of destruction. Seeing his speed, the demon widens his eyes, completely shocked and surprised. Advancing at high speed, Eldomia prepares a strike to finish the fleeing demon. With a quick movement, he hits the enemy's head, cutting it off the body. With red eyes, he uses all his strength to end the great threat, but the headless body keeps running, diving headfirst into the portal to escape. Looking at the portal, he's shocked to see the enemy fleeing even so. Then, the two bodies are pulled into the portal, vanishing from the castle hall. Seeing the scene, Ekaterina screams her friend's name, desperate about what happened. On the other side, the portal opens, and the army prepares for the invasion. With a smile, one of the demons celebrates the success of the great portal operation. The army commander prepares to advance as soon as the squadron returns from the mission. Beside him, a demon praises Encantor, who is his younger brother. Suddenly, the portal begins to glow, indicating it was successfully activated. At that moment, one of the soldiers announces the return of the great Lord Encantor from his mission. Nearby, a foot steps on the ground, and a mysterious figure exits the portal. It was Eldomia, who now found himself surrounded by an army of demons and enemies. Confused, the army commander doesn't recognize the figure that came out of the portal. Standing, Eldomia faces the army, ready for the next great battle to come. Right behind him, Encantor's head falls to the ground, coming out of the portal. Rolling on the ground, it stops near the feet of that great army's commander. Seeing the head, the commander stares at his brother, completely shocked and without reaction. With wide eyes, he can't believe what just happened. Shocked, the soldiers also don't understand how their lord was defeated that way. On the ground, Encantor's head reveals the elite squadron's defeat. In disbelief, they question how a boy managed to defeat such a powerful and strong demon. Facing the army, he prepares to fight them all at once. Not knowing what to do, the soldiers ask their great commander for orders. In silence, the commander just stares at the boy with a look of pure fury. Screaming with rage, he asks what happened to his brother. Arriving at the location, Eldomia faces Dakan and his soldiers in front of a magical portal. Visibly wounded and covered in blood, he can barely stand after the battle. Then he opens his eyes, staring at the enemies with a completely focused and determined look. Before him, a horde of demons waits for Dakan's command to begin the attack. Feeling the pressure, the young warrior grips the hilt of his sword with all his strength. At that moment, the demon commander explodes with rage and yells at the blue-haired boy. Advancing rapidly, he prepares a sword strike to end this once and for all. Even on his knees, Eldomia just listens to the demon's threats without showing any reaction. But he lifts his face, revealing a calm and defiant look to his direct opponent. Seeing this reaction, Dakan points the sword at the boy's neck and stares at him fixedly. Unconcerned, Eldomia stands up and points with his thumb to the portal behind him. At that moment, he opens a slight smile and keeps staring at the demon commander right in the eyes. Noticing his attitude, one of the soldiers asks Dakan what they should do. Then Dakan turns his face to the side, surprised by the young warrior's attitude. Awaiting the decision, Eldomia just keeps his gaze firm on the demon commander in front of him. Meanwhile, the blade of the demon's sword reflects the light of the tense environment. Believing the story, Dakan opens a mocking smile and seems to have a new idea. Right after, he gives an order to one of his soldiers who obeys immediately. Not understanding what's going on, Eldomia just watches the action with a confused look. Then, one of the demons begins to move a huge huge wooden device with difficulty. Seeing that, the young warrior is completely shocked and without any possible reaction. Behind him, a gigantic energy sphere is revealed, surprising the blue-haired boy. With a smile on his face, Dakan reveals that this was his true plan all along. Screaming with euphoria, he threatens to use the artifact to destroy their entire kingdom. At that moment, a soldier tries to stop his commander, but is interrupted with a shout of rage. Grabbing the subordinate, Dakan justifies his decision because of the crisis they're facing now. With a crazed look, he states that his superiors will understand the situation later. Fallen on the ground, Eldomia realizes that his lie only made the situation worse for everyone. Then, he understands that the artifact is, in fact, a bomb of immense power. In the end, a gigantic explosion destroys the entire landscape around without mercy. Realizing the truth, he understands that the portal was meant to transport that deadly weapon. Grinding his teeth in rage, he wonders what kind of monsters would do this. Then, Dakan orders his men to push the bomb and the boy through the portal. Obeying the order, the soldiers run toward Eldomia to initiate the final attack. Completely surrounded, the young warrior is forced to retreat near the magical portal. But with a determined look, he decides he needs to stop that threat no matter what. Remembering the past, he can't let a tragedy like that happen again in the kingdom. Not knowing what to do, he defends the soldier's strikes while being pushed back. Suddenly, he feels a familiar presence and looks up, totally surprised by this. Turning his face, he can't believe what he's seeing happen beside him. Leaping from the sky, his companions arrive full force against the remaining demon soldiers. At that moment, Ekaterina yells that they were late because they were searching for their weapons before arriving. Then, the group starts fighting and clears a path through the soldiers for the boy. Seeing the help, Eldomia is left without reaction, just watching his friends in action there. But soon after, he opens a relieved smile, happy with their arrival. Advancing full force, Eldomia prepares his magical sword for the final attack against the artifact. At that moment, Dakan realizes he was deceived and screams with rage at the young warrior. Concentrating his last forces, he gathers all the remaining magical power in his sword. Then, the young warrior screams while releasing all his energy at once. Right after, he hurls his sword with all his strength toward the giant sphere. With an intense glow, the blade flies rapidly toward its main target. Seeing his attempt, Dakan mocks and yells that the artifact is well protected. At that instant, the sword approaches the energy barrier protecting the bomb. But to everyone's surprise, the blade pierces through the protection without any difficulty. Seeing that, the demon commander is completely paralyzed and without any possible reaction. Then, the sword hits the artifact dead center, causing a small crack on the surface. At the same instant, the demon soldiers are shocked by the young human's strength. Meanwhile, the blade lodged in the bomb begins to destabilize its entire structure. With the impact received, the artifact begins to crack and leak energy from all sides. Realizing the plan's success, Eldomia opens a relieved smile with the final result. Seeing the bomb about to explode, the demon soldiers run desperately away from it. But Dakan stands still, watching the intense light emanating from the totally unstable artifact. Realizing the attack's power, he's shocked by the young human's strength. Meanwhile, Eldomia falls to the ground, powerless after using all his power. Trying to stand up, he realizes his legs no longer respond to his commands. This happens because he pushed his body beyond the limit to destroy the bomb. Suddenly, his eyes widen as he notices the imminent explosion approaching rapidly. Glowing more and more, the bomb finally reaches its limit and begins to explode. Unable to move, he just watches the explosion coming in his total direction. In the last second, his companion's hands appear to try to save him from danger. Grabbing the boy, they pull him forcefully away from the approaching explosion. Then, everyone is thrown hard through the portal to escape the great explosion. On the other side, an intense light comes out of the portal, showing the detonation's power. Inside there, Dakan is completely swallowed by the light, with nowhere to run now. Finishing everything, a gigantic explosion completely destroys the demon's camp at the location. Unstable, the portal begins to pull everything around it with impressive force. Coming out of it, the group of adventurers is thrown hard onto the kingdom's ground. Even exhausted, Eldomia is held up by one of his friends to keep from passing out right there. With a tired gaze, he tries to stay awake, but his body won't respond. Until finally, his vision darkens completely, and he blacks out on the spot. After some time unconscious, he slowly begins to regain his senses again. Opening his eyes, Eldomia finds himself lying in a bed with his entire body bandaged. Sitting up, he tries to understand what happened and where he was now. Just then, a person appears at the bedroom door and speaks to the young warrior. Entering the room, Walter reveals they were now at the royal capital's hospital. Then he apologizes for everything and begins to explain the situation to the boy. During the conversation, He mentions he already knew about the demon's plans to build a portal. Paying close attention, the young man hears that his efforts were essential in preventing the tragedy. Next, Walter thanks Eldomia on behalf of the entire kingdom for his great courage. Worried, he asks if all his friends were also okay after the huge explosion. With a smile, Walter says his friends are fine and recovering peacefully. Not understanding, Eldomia questions why they needed to hide from everyone. But Walter ignores the question and quickly changes the subject between them. Revealing then, he says he has a special proposal for the young warrior there. Getting straight to the point, he stares at the boy with a serious and focused look. Then, he invites Eldomia to become an official knight of their kingdom. Upon hearing the proposal, the boy falls silent for a long moment on the bed. Then, Walter explains that the kingdom's superiors have their eye on his potential. Thinking about the offer, Eldomia brings his hand to his face and analyzes the whole situation. Still thoughtful, he covers his mouth while making his final big decision about it. Getting up from the bed, the boy refuses the offer and surprises Walter with his attitude. Turning his back, he states he already understood the motives behind the invitation. With a serious look, Walter questions him about what he's talking about now. Starting to get dressed, he prepares to confront the man in front of him. Already on his feet, he reveals that the kingdom is losing the war against the demons. Surprised by the accusation, Walter is left speechless and just stares at the young warrior. Continuing to speak, he says he found it strange they sent adventurers instead of the army. Then, he concludes that the secret mission was an excuse to hide the truth. Staring at the man, he calls him desperate for offering the knight title. Heading toward the door, he refuses to be used by their superiors. But Walter tries to convince him, saying the title would help him with his revenge. With a focused look, he states he'll decide on his own how to fight and get revenge. Trying to stop him, Walter calls his name before he leaves the room for good. At that, he admits the kingdom is in a critical situation without many soldiers. But he insists the invitation is sincere, because Eldomia is a valuable asset. Finally, Walter warns him that many important people already have their eye on him. Just listening, the young warrior remains silent before the hooded man's warning. Scene change. Eldomia now walks through the busy streets of the kingdom's capital. Suddenly, he stops in surprise upon finding a familiar figure right in front of him. Right there, Cheryl stares at him with crossed arms, leaning against a stone wall. With a smile, he asks if she came to pick him up from the city hospital, but the blonde-haired girl just stares at him with a serious and indifferent look. Not understanding, he questions the reason for that cold and distant reaction from her. At that, she takes a step forward and starts walking without saying anything. Walking down the street, the girl says he looks well for someone who faced demons. Right after, she tells him to follow her, as she needs to stop by a place first. Arriving at the location, the two enter a weapons and battle equipment shop. Looking at the swords, he's confused, not understanding what they were doing there now. Then, she explains that her father sent her to buy a new weapon for him. Hearing that, he becomes thoughtful and brings his hand to his chin for a moment. Remembering the fight, he recalls the immense power his opponent used against him. At that moment, his enemy released a force he had never seen before in his life. Coming out of his thoughts, he looks to the side and seems to have a pretty interesting idea. Calling the blacksmith, the young warrior approaches the counter to ask a question. Then, he asks if the man has a sword that can withstand greater power. Explaining the situation, the blacksmith says he doesn't sell such expensive dwarven weapons. Turning to the boy, Cheryl complains that he needs to have a bit more sense. Then, she tells him to choose a standard sword, being watched by a hidden figure. Behind a pillar, the mysterious person continues spying on their conversation attentively. Changing scenery, they arrive at a giant mansion with very luxurious architecture. Inside, a butler serves tea to them both while they wait for the house's hostess. Talking with Eldomia, Cheryl explains that the Margrave is a very busy person in the kingdom. At that moment, the blue-haired boy looks toward the window, curious about something there. In the reflection, he sees soldiers with uniforms he had never seen before in his life. Surprised, he asks why the Eshnua Empire and Rivi were invited to the location. Then, she reveals that the Margrave wants to hear his report before departing. Showing on the map, the Eshnua Empire is the largest and most influential human territory. Besides, they have the most powerful and well-trained army on the entire continent, but their great advantage is the ability to produce a true war hero. Suddenly, the room's door begins to open slowly for everyone there. Looking at the door, Eldomia is surprised by the person who was entering. Then Revi appears and greets the young warrior with a smile on her face. Right after, Cheryl thanks the noble for the invitation to that very important meeting. Starting to talk, Eldomia compliments the red-haired girl, saying she's grown. Continuing the conversation, he says he's very happy to see her again after so long. At that, he comments it must have been hard for her to get where she is now, but Ravi explains that her work makes her remember her father with pride. Hearing the answer, Eldomia looks at her with a gentle smile and a serene gaze. Changing subjects, she reveals she called him to hear the details of the infiltration. Then, Ravi asks him to start by talking about the subjugation of the bandits at the farm. After some time, the teacup rests empty on the coffee table. Hearing the report, she realizes the situation is much worse than she imagined. With a worried look, she begins to think about the real reason for their invitation. Noticing her reaction, Eldomia gets confused and asks if he said something wrong. With an apprehensive face, she apologizes and says she needs to ask a favor. Then, Revi asks him to go with her to meet the hero of the Eshnua Empire. Arriving at the destination, a teleportation portal opens in a busy plaza. A foot in an elegant boot steps out of the mysterious portal. Right after, Eldomia emerges wearing a new military uniform, looking around the area. With a surprised look, he's amazed by the grandeur of this new place. Before him, an imperial city with imposing architecture reveals itself completely. Showing from above, the great Eshnua Empire stretches across a vast coastal area. But suddenly, the blue-haired boy hears a noise and looks worried. Beside him, Revi bends over and feels sick from the portal trip. With a pale face, she tries to recover from the dizziness and nausea. After some time, they stroll and observe the nobles in their elegant attire. In another place, people and children enjoy the day peacefully on the city streets. Seeing the scene, Revi is amazed by the peace and beauty of that place. Walking together, she comments to Eldomia about the tranquility of the great human civilization. Then she says it's hard to believe a war is happening somewhere. Hearing this, the young warrior looks at her with a serious and worried expression. Concerned, he says he's the only guard protecting Revi and her small entourage, but she explains that bringing an army to a diplomatic discussion would raise too many suspicions. Suddenly, a tall man appears and greets the Margrave with a very formal tone. Introducing himself, Marcus Esdel Lavande offers to be their guide. Then Revi greets him and says it's an honor to be received by him. Seeing Eldomia, the nobleman asks who the blue-haired young man beside her is. With a curious look, he observes the boy, trying to understand his presence there. Awkwardly, the young warrior just gives a nervous laugh, not knowing what to say. Then the Marquis invites them to enter the carriage waiting for them on the street. Happy, Revi thanks the nobleman for the reception and kindness toward their group. Going back in time, Eldomia wonders why they want to meet this so-called hero. In her room, the red-haired girl looks at him and seems a bit tense. With a serious look, she reveals that she needs to help train the new hero. Shocked by the news, he questions the reason for such a strange and sudden request. Crossing his arms, Eldomia thinks all of this is a huge waste of time for them. Processing the information, Eldomia realizes the invitation isn't just a diplomatic formality. Thinking about the situation, he concludes that the Empire just wants to show off its power. Then he understands that this is a grand demonstration of the Empire's political strength. Confirming the suspicion, Revi says this is a threat to small nations. With that, she explains, this is how politics works between kingdoms. Implying further, she suspects they want to control her kingdom after the war. Inside the carriage, the young warrior reflects on the Empire's conquest plan. Soon after, the carriage stops moving, and they finally arrive at their destination. Getting out, they discover that Revi will be a temporary student at the local academy. Walking through the corridors, the two head toward the location of their big meeting. Looking around, he's impressed by the luxury and grandeur of the academy. Suddenly, the red-haired girl smiles and waves at someone in the corridor. Appearing in front of them, an older man greets the young woman with joy in his eyes. At that, the two embrace and Revi says he hasn't changed at all. Introducing him to her friend, she reveals that he was her former magic teacher. Introducing himself, Professor Lagnell Vandus extends his hand to greet the young warrior. Shaking his hand, Eldomia introduces himself, but is surprised by the mage's strength. With a loud laugh, Lagnell reveals he's heard a lot about the boy. Praising the boy, he says the young man has a determined and strong gaze. With a smile on his face, the mage explains that body and mind must be healthy. Then he offers to support the duo during their stay at the academy. Changing scenes, a group of students gathers in the academy's main courtyard. Checking the list, an assistant informs them the hero hasn't arrived yet. Irritated by the delay, Master Lagnell complains about the boy's lack of punctuality. Beside him, other students complain about the hero's attitude, visibly bothered by the situation. Among them, Eldomia observes the scene, trying to understand what was happening there. With a confused look, he senses a strange and heavy atmosphere among the students. Suddenly, a loud and lively voice breaks the silence and draws everyone's attention. Turning around, Eldomia and Revi look curiously to see who was finally arriving. Walking with two girls, The hero arrives with a mocking and very cocky smile. Shocked by the scene, Eldomia can't believe what he's seeing in front of him. With a conceited look, the Empire's hero stares at the girl mockingly. Looking directly at Revi, he says he should have arrived earlier to see her. Then he approaches, asking if she's his new training partner there. Complimenting the girl's beauty, he makes her completely uncomfortable with the comment. Not caring, he invites her out, but she stares at him seriously. At that, he touches her shoulder, insisting on the invitation to go to a tavern. Coming from behind, Eldomia grabs the hero's arm, interrupting his approach right away. Surprised by the action, the hero looks up with a contemptuous stare. With a threatening look, the young warrior asks if he wants to start a problem. With tension in the air, the professor and the assistant are shocked by the scene. Around them, the other students shout in surprise at the young warrior's boldness. With a mocking smile, the hero questions if he knows who he's talking to. Unfazed, Eldomia grips his arm harder and stares him down. But the hero grabs him by the uniform, finding the boy's attitude quite interesting. Then, he asks Revi who the guard accompanying her on the mission is. Mocking the kingdom, the hero says the others were always cowardly and boring. Irritated by the lack of respect, Eldomia demands that he treat the Margrave better. In the middle of the argument, Master Lagnell appears to separate the two young men. Pulling the boy aside, he advises him not to let his emotions get the better of him there. Then, he reprimands the hero, saying he needs to think about his position. Not giving a damn, Eldomia just observes the scene with a look of contempt. Soon after, the assistant announces the Margrave's arrival to all the students present. Introducing herself formally, Revi greets the academy students with a gentle smile on her face, but some students begin to whisper about her family and her small territory. With a serious look, one of the students wonders how long she'll last. Closing the presentation, Master Lagnell asks the assistant to prepare the practical lesson. Placing his hand on the ground, he activates a magic circle to create the field. From the ground, a square platform forms in the center of the academy courtyard. Then, an enormous energy structure emerges, enveloping the entire training field. At the top of the structure, a ring of red light shines intensely in the sky. After that, a second ring of light forms, completing the battle arena. With an intense glow, the entire scenery around the courtyard begins to change. At the end, a stone platform emerges, marking the beginning of the battlefield. Looking up, Eldomia asks what that ring of light floating is. With a smile, the assistant explains that it's a work of magical technology. Confused, the young warrior tries to understand the use of illusions in a battle. Then Master Lagnell calls two students for a battle demonstration on the field. With an intense glow, the student's hand begins to manifest a magical weapon. Soon after, a blue energy sword appears, ready for simulation combat. Meanwhile, the female student manifests an energy staff, preparing herself for combat. Seeing the weapons appear out of nowhere, Eldomia is shocked by their magical technology. With a hand gesture, the master authorizes the start of the simulation battle. Then the swordsman advances quickly, leaping toward his opponent with everything. In response, the mage concentrates energy at the tip of the staff to prepare her counterattack. Soon after, she strikes the ground with a blow, creating an energy barrier. Dodging the attack, the guy spins in the air and prepares a direct strike against her. Then, the two clash in close combat, exchanging really fast blows with each other. Watching from afar, Eldomia is impressed by the intensity of that training fight. Seeing the violence, he can hardly believe that this is just a simulation. In a careless moment, the swordsman's foot gets trapped in an energy trap on the ground. Noticing the trap, he tries to free himself, but he can't escape at all. Taking advantage of the opening, the mage prepares a final blow with all her strength concentrated. Firing the attack, she hits the guy squarely, generating a huge explosion on the spot. Seeing the scene, Eldomia grabs the assistant, but he just asks him to keep watching. Right after that, the swordsman's body dissolves into bright light particles. Shouting in frustration, the guy laments having lost the simulation battle. Then Master Lagnell declares the end of the fight and congratulates the student on her victory. Still confused, Eldomia holds the assistant's arm, trying to understand what happened there. Explaining the technology, he reveals that the device can project anything from the mind. With an energy model, he shows how the ring recreates weapons and injuries. Thanks to this, students can gain battle experience without running any risk. Impressed, Eldomia realizes the huge technological difference between the Empire and his kingdom. Then, the assistant suggests that the Margrave participate in a demonstration battle as well, but Lagnell tries to intervene, reminding him that the Marquis gave direct orders about the matter. With a serious look, the master stares at the assistant, who gets tense with the reaction. Turning around, he looks up at the top of the building, where the Marquis was watching everything attentively. Up there, The nobleman observes the academy courtyard from a very luxurious balcony. Suddenly, a female figure approaches the Marquis, who greets her formally there. Then, the dark-haired woman asks who will be the Margrave's opponent in the fight. With a smile, the Marquis decides that the hero doesn't need to fight against her. Meanwhile, the students observe the scene. Sitting on the benches of the Magic Academy. Attentive to the conversation, Revi stares at the Marquis with a serious and very suspicious look. Revolted by the plan, Lagnell says he'll speak personally with the Marquis about this. But Revi approaches and asks to fight, surprising the master and the assistant. Trying to stop her, Lagnell says she doesn't need to risk herself like that there. With a confident smile, she asks whose disciple he thinks she is. Upon hearing the answer, the master stares at her with a proud and satisfied look. Then, the assistant announces the duel and calls the Margrave's opponent to fight. On the bench, the girl asks if she can fight without holding back in the battle. Winking at Eldomia, the hero reveals he's only interested in the blue-haired young man. Staring at the boy, the hero continues to provoke him with a mocking look. Worried about the fight, he asks if Revi is sure of her decision, but with a determined smile, she says she's been expecting this from the beginning. At the center of the courtyard, the assistant announces the beginning of the battle between the two. With a confident smile, Revi's opponent manifests a green energy staff. Meanwhile, the red-haired girl summons a red energy spear to fight. Worried, Eldomia questions her decision, reminding her that Revi has no combat experience, but the master calms him down, saying she only pretended to be fragile before. With a serious look, he asks the boy to just watch the fight carefully. Then, the assistant shouts and authorizes the start of the battle between the two mages. Taking a quick step, Revi's opponent advances with everything she's got. With a swift strike, she launches an energy attack toward the Margrave. Preparing the attack, the tip of the mage's staff glows with a very intense light. Leaping into the air, she launches a pillar of sacred light with full force. But Revi just watches the strike approaching, with a calm and serene look. Desperate, Eldomia shouts for her to get out of the way and dodge the attack immediately. At the last second, an energy barrier appears and protects the girl from the blow. Shocked by the scene, the young warrior is left speechless seeing the defense. Surprised, the blonde mage can't believe what she's seeing in front of her. Up on the balcony, the Marquis and the purple-haired woman observe the fight. Shocked, she wonders how Revi used magic without any incantation beforehand. Recognizing the ability, the mage praises the Margrave's power with a smile. Then, she concentrates more energy into her staff, preparing for a new strike. With a giant magic circle, she warns that she won't hold back anymore. Right after, she launches multiple energy attacks against the red-haired girl. With a focused look, Revi prepares to dodge and counter her strike. Jumping into the air, she creates an energy platform and launches her own attack. With an intense glow, the strike flies at high speed toward the opponent. Dodging the attack, she deflects Revi's magic with a blow from her spear. With a determined look, the Margrave prepares for the next phase of the battle. But her opponent raises her staff and says the fight ends here. In the sky, an enormous green energy spear begins to form slowly now. Summoning the weapon, she prepares to use her most powerful strike in the fight. With full force, the energy spear descends at high speed against Revi. Rolling her eyes, she prepares to use her special defense ability. With a war cry, she summons the powerful shield of Etisiel to protect herself. With an intense glow, the energy shield materializes in front of her rapidly. Then the attack is blocked by a barrier and an energy guardian. Surprised by the scene, the hero sits down to observe the fight more attentively. Shocked by the power, Eldomia shouts, unable to believe the strength of that defensive ability. With a smile, Master Lagnell praises the magnificent shield protecting the girl. Explaining the story, he reveals that her family is famous for their magic. For their services, they received the title of Margrave and the Shield of the Kingdom. Remembering the past, he tells how he was invited to be their tutor. Among the siblings, he reveals that Revi was the most talented and promising, but the family's territory was attacked and destroyed by the Demon King's army. Upon learning the news, he felt powerless and fell into great despair. However, with a hopeful look, he continues to tell the rest of the story. Watching the girl, he gets emotional seeing her assume her place as Margrave. With a proud smile, he comments that she became a strong, remarkable woman. Hearing the story, Eldomia looks at Revi with a gaze of admiration and respect. Remembering the kidnapping, he recalls when he fought to save her life. In that moment, he saw the determination and strength she had within herself. With a determined look, he realizes he wasn't the only one who wanted to evolve. Meanwhile, the Energy Guardian continues to defend against the enemy spear's attack. With a powerful blow, the Guardian's shield breaks the opponent's spear into pieces. Then, Revi shouts and transforms her Guardian into an energy giant to counterattack. Faced with the power, the blonde mage is paralyzed, unable to believe what was happening. Shocked by the scene, she can't react to the giant Guardian's imminent attack. With his sword raised, He prepares to deliver the final blow in the battle. The Guardian advances and strikes the ground with a devastating and very powerful blow. Desperate, the assistant shouts and ends the simulation battle between the two mages. With her spear in hand, Revi celebrates the victory with a relieved smile. With the end of the fight, the mage's body dissolves into particles of light. Fallen on the ground, she admits defeat, shocked by her opponent's power. In disbelief, the students can't believe the Academy's best student lost the fight. From above, the white-haired woman observes the scene with a cold look. With contempt, she says the girl will never be more than the fourth princess. Turning to the Marquis, she questions the power the Margrave demonstrated in the arena. With a smile, he says, Etisiel Kingdom's potential is surprising. Disdaining the comment, she says that's just a legend from the past. With a look of superiority, she states that no kingdom can rival them. Staring at the courtyard, she seems to have a plan for the whole situation she saw. Then she turns to the Marquis with a smile and says she had an idea. With a raised finger, she suggests that the hero and the Margrave fight now.